Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and I am here with.
Rob H. This is AV Rant, the show where we answer your questions about all things home theater and audio video. And unexpectedly, did not have an episode last week. Oh man, did things happen? And so yeah, we're trying to play some massive catch up, and who knows how long this podcast will be? Probably not long
It's
enough.
going to be long. We'll see. We're starting early, so I don't even think anybody's
Yep.
going to be here for it. But yeah, so last week Rob had to bail, and I had to bail, and then I
hmm
scheduled to go with Lee, but then I bailed on Lee. So Lee kept he was every night. I think he was just sitting by the computer, like, oh, it's ready to go.
Yes,
I'm just waiting for Tom to call, and I
we
never.
need to thank and apologize to Lee because he's been very kind to us, offering to be around to
Yes.
potentially fill in.
Does he
And
have any? He had questions. Does he have any questions that he's asked us officially?
oh, well, wow, I don't remember. That's how awesome a friend I am to Lee. So
Yeah. I know he's got some subwoofer questions. Lee is still under the opinion that we don't know what we're talking about subwoofer replacement, but I don't know how that can be the case. So we're gonna tell him where to put his subwoofers maybe at some point. He lives someplace weird too, like in the middle of the country where it snows or something. So, oh no, he lives in Alabama, I think. Yeah. So it might snow there. I think it snowed there this year. It snowed everywhere but Florida. Anywho, so what happened with me is my wife's father passed last week, and I was dealing with funerals and celebration of life parties. My wife was like the night before his funeral. She's like, "You're gonna say something, right?" I'm like, "I guess I will come up with something." So I did it. It was very nice. I was told by other people who witnessed the event. But now, all of those things are past, and we're just dealing with the aftermath. And it's going fine. My wife is dealing with it as best I think as can be expected. We're really waiting to see how her mom reacts. That hasn't really kind of hit home for her yet because she's
mhm.
been so busy with all the preparations, and I don't know why my camera looks like this. So hopefully on YouTube I won't look all wide and stretched out, but whatever. So
Well, my
basically that's
condolences,
why
of course,
I
to you and your family. My condolences, and obviously all the listeners will be passing along their condolences as well. So,
yes, and when we
uh,
appreciate it, it was not unexpected, but it happened quicker than we. If you know
mm,
it was sick, but we didn't know it was going to happen. It was sort of like, hey, it's not looking too good, and oh, he's dead. So yeah, it was a little on the unexpected side. So, uh, but that's enough of that. Let's get into these questions because we got lots. But before
do
we
we?
do that, of course, we do have to talk about the fact that I almost don't want to tell you how to contact us to ask us more questions at this point. At this
Nope,
point,
you have to do that, Tom.
ugh,
That's what we're gonna do.
I feel bad because up until like recently we've been really good. Like you ask us a
hmm
question within a week and a half, you get it answered,
hmm
almost guaranteed. Within a week and a half, you get it answered. And now we're like got people we string along for like 3 weeks, and I feel really bad about that. So yes, this is AV Rent. This is the podcast where we answer your home theater and AV questions. And yes, in certain cases we have been answering emails directly, but we have both been so busy that we have not been doing that very often. So if we got an email from us this week, won the lottery. Buy a ticket. For the rest of you, we will be answering your questions. Hopefully,
Yes.
they can wait until we get around to them, but we will be answering because even if you've already made your decision, somebody else may have the same question. So,
hmm
if you do have a question and you would like to ask it to us, it's very easy. You can email Rob at avrant.com, Tom at avrant.com. You can come to our website, which of course is www.avrant.com, and comment there. You can go to the Facebook page, which is where a lot of people get a hold of us, facebook.com/avrantpodcast. That's all one word. Um,
Tweet.
Twitter's for, at First Reflect for Rob and at avrant_Tom for me. Of course, we do record these live. Sometimes we even record them live where you can see them, which is what we're doing today. You can see that on G Plus at one of our hangouts. So you just friend me on whatever plus Tom Andry. It's all one word.
Google.com/plus.manager. That one's actually pretty simple.
I thought there's an exclamation point in there someplace. Isn't
Nope,
it
you don't need
slash
anything.
exclamation
There's a
slash?
plus. Google.com/plus. Some like
Anywho, I'm
actual
not
plus
really all
symbol.
that hard to find. What if you friend me and I don't know who you are? I will
Mm-hmm.
put and you don't seem like some sort of mega spammer. I will put you into like I got occasionally get one from Get More Muscles. That'll
Mm-hmm.
be their name. Yeah, I'm like okay,
That's
no,
probably like a friend of Gene's.
could be. Gene does have a lot of guys who have friends that are muscles guys. So,
Yep.
uh, you if I don't recognize who you are and I'm like a friend like person I know in real life, I'll put you in my listeners group and then I'll send you sometime before we record, which is 9 p.m. or today 8:38 p.m. on on Tuesdays. That's Eastern time. And we record for a couple hours, and then we usually have a hangout afterwards where we will just kind of chat with whoever's around. So if you're interested in getting your question, if you're really like, oh my God, I must have this question answered, well, that's one way to do it because, like Byron, who showed up at one of our hangouts, he got all
Mm-hmm.
of his questions
Couple.
answered that way, and then he got to listen to them again on the podcast. And I don't think we contradicted ourselves. So there you go.
Shouldn't, not on that stuff.
There you go. And of course, if you're like, oh, I really want to see what these guys look like, well, it's not that hard. You just go to YouTube. I think my channel is Mr. Namas,
That's right.
Mrnomas, which is what my brother used to call me. And I say used to. I mean, like used to, as in he called me that yesterday. So he'll call me that again tomorrow. So anyhow, let's go with our listeners of the week to start off with.
Mm-hmm.
Is this all of them from like the last 2 weeks,
I
3 weeks?
really think it is, and my gosh, am I sorry if I missed somebody, but I'm pretty sure this is complete for the past 2 weeks.
Okay, so this is February 3rd. So if you did something uh, before February 3rd and your name is not being mentioned, email Rob with hate mail. No, or me probably, because I probably forwarded it to Rob to begin with.
That's also a possibility. Yeah.
I've been pretty good about it. Alan G. Alan bought two SVS PB2000 subwoofers, which arrived at his place within 24 hours of ordering them, and emailed SVS to let us know it was because of our recommendation. There's a number of ways you become our listener of the week. You can go to our website, and you can click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee, which will allow you to give us a PayPal donation that goes to support the podcast. Or if you've done something like Alan has, which is to buy something, you say, hey, SVS, it's because of these guys, and you
Mm-hmm.
CC us, and we'll like, okay, great, thank you, you're help supporting the podcast. Um, if you're like Paul McDonald and you have a race car, you could put a sticker on the side of the race car, and I was complaining that he wasn't racing enough last 2 weeks ago, so he wanted to remind me, and he had already told me this, and I knew this, but I kind of forgot, was that he had also stuck those stickers on the side of his trailer, which is
Mm-hmm.
being used by other racers, so that trailer's going around, and it's got AV Rant right there, and I think that's pretty awesome. So, Paul, of course, for reminding me of that, he becomes a listener of the week. He also got a kick out of the dancing water speakers. It's a what is it, dude? Is it something you put on top of speakers, or is it plugged in? I didn't really
No, these
couldn't
are
get it.
actual like PC speakers. They're USB speakers,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, it's a company called Gadgetry with like a punny spelling of that name, like tree at the end isn't a thing that grows. But yeah, no, somebody actually took them
Oh,
apart on YouTube and showed how they work, and it's basically a little like the vibrating thing in your phone, so the little thing that spins around.
yeah.
So that's in there, and that responds to the audio signal, and it makes some liquid kind of dance inside of the container that's on top of the
That's
speaker.
cute. I
It,
like
it is. It's like your own personal little, visualizer or EQ thing, but physical.
yeah, that's kind of cool. I
Yeah.
don't hate them. I want them not to have to be part of those crappy speakers though. Josh sent us a donation. This was last week.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill last week also wrote to say how much he enjoyed my books.
Hmm.
Great. I'm glad somebody's still
Yes.
reading them. I need to write some more. Bill also wrote to an author named Brandon Sanderson to let him know about my books, which I did not catch that in his email. I
Oh,
don't.
it was in there. It
I,
was for sure in the email.
I believe that, but that is amazing. And Bill thinks that if you enjoyed Bob Moore, you'll likely enjoy Brandon's sci-fi, fantasy, and superhero themed books as well. Didn't he work with Frank Herbert's son to write the follow-up to the Dune series? And isn't it Sanderson that worked with him? I think it is.
I have no idea.
Because
I
I've never read a
wouldn't venture
Sanderson
to
book, but
guess.
I have read those books. So, yeah. That's great. Well, great. That's fantastic. So I guess check them out. We now coming up on this week, Jose, James, and Joshua all sent in donations. Which thank you very much, guys. Those
Yes, if
donations
your name
do
starts
go.
with a J, you are obligated to donate to us. Apparently,
Apparently,
that
it's
is
a very
apparently the
J
rule.
like we're not even done with the J. So we've got well, so far we've got no, we've got a Josh, a Jose, a James, another well, a Joshua, and for sending us donations there. Those last three, Jose, James, and Joshua, those do support the podcast and pay our bills and keep us on the road here. And Jared chatted with SVS customer service and let them know he was buying from them because of us.
Yay!
So there you go. Yay. I thought you should have us called up. If you didn't hear your name, you should have. Rob's email is rob@avrant.com. Now, don't bother emailing me because if I didn't forward it the first time, I might not forward it the second time. All right. Because Rob does come up with these questions usually. Now, rather than trying to give you a preview of what we're going to talk about, we're just going to start
Yeah, good
talking
luck with that.
because we don't got time. We got time for that nonsense. We're just
Yes,
going
we're
to
gonna
get
be
straight into it.
so prepared for this one because we've had 2 whole weeks, right, Tom? That's
I
our
watched
last.
this video today. I
Yeah.
watched it. That's how
Oh,
prepared I
okay.
am.
That's way more prepared than normal.
That hey, hey,
And
hey.
you never watch videos. You're
I
like,
listen to them
this
in the
thing is
background
longer than 2 minutes.
sometimes.
Forget it. That's your
Well,
normal
sometimes they're really
response.
bad. This one was not much better, but it's yes. Okay. Anyways, Efren sent us a link to a collection of YouTube videos from the Rocky Mountain Audio Festival, which is where snake oil goes to get born for the most part. For those who might be interested, and we'll put a link up to that. He's also enjoyed ones on room acoustics where they ran a. That's I did they really? Okay. I didn't
Yeah.
get, I must not have gotten to the end because I didn't realize that he had not gotten to bass management, where they ran out of time just as they were getting to bass management and subwoofer placement. He's really interested in the seminars on headphones, but he thought we might have something to rant about on the seminar titled High Fidelity Stereo. That's not natural. How to make it that way. That was the whole title,
Yeah.
which goes into the master set speaker setup process. That's the one I watched. Um,
Yep.
and we've talked about the master set. You've specifically talked about the master set
Yeah,
before,
it
and
was
basically,
when George Tucker was
yeah,
co-hosting this that one
yeah,
time, so and talked about the master set
and which is
speaker set.
fun. Basically what it is like, okay, let's say your child does not want to eat vegetables.
Okay.
So you take something that is a vegetable,
Mm-hmm.
but you carve it to look like a hot dog,
Mm-hmm.
and you put it in a piece of bread, and you tell them it's a hot dog, and they eat it and they like it. That's what master set is. Okay? That's what it is. Master set is
Eh.
taking proper placement that doesn't take nearly as long as what this guy is talking about and dressing it up full, kind of, infusing it with enough snake oil and flowery speech and BS to make it seem like make it palatable to the audiophiles because they're like,
Right.
okay, well, I mean, the part that kept throwing me was him worrying about rake of the speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And he's raking the speakers back, basically pointing, tilting them up so that the
Yep.
mouth of the person that where you're hearing it from comes from the proper height that that person is,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Because don't they just put the microphone right in the person's mouth, pretty much? So why would the
What
microphone or the recording in any way know how tall that person was
what if
in
they were
order
like
for it to be
sitting on the
properly
floor?
put? So,
What if they're like 6'5", but they were sitting on the front of the stage when they made the recording? What then? What do you do then? Do you tilt? Do you rake the speakers forward so they're aiming down at the floor? Is
I
that what
just
you
don't
do?
know. He was like, okay, well, so and so is 5'7", so if you're not hearing something from about 5'7", then you need
Right.
to
Yeah.
rake them forward or back or whatever. I'm like, you see, and that's what I'm talking about. I'm like, this gives them stuff to do that they're going, oh yeah, this totally is going to make a difference. And clearly, it's not really. They're going to end up with like a 1 degree rake, maybe, which probably isn't. I mean, really isn't going to make that much of a difference for them. So that's what I'm saying. There's enough snake oil in there just to get it so that the the audiophiles in the audience would go, "Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, chocolatey mid ranges. Yeah, I'm with you there. Yep. Okay, now you're adjusting for the height. That's what's really going to make the difference is the rake, not all this other stuff, which put the speakers in the proper placement that you could have done just by going right about there, and that would have pretty much done it. No, okay, it's the rake. I gotcha.
Well, yes, the main thing about the master set process is it focuses on getting the bass response correct first, which I am all for. It's just doing it without subwoofers because, of course, many of the people at the Rocky Mountain Audio Festival are strict two-channel only, and we don't want subwoofers. We only want full-range speakers type of people. And the master set process addresses that side of things by saying, look, you need to get the speakers positioned in your room so that they're producing as linear a bass response at your listening position as you can get. So I don't have any problem with that other than saying this is the only way to do it, as opposed to just saying, well, if you just got a pair of subwoofers and set them up correctly, you wouldn't have to worry about this. And the whole thing of saying you have to use this one particular song to set it up instead of bass sweeps. And like I mentioned when George Tucker was here, I listened to that song, and all it is, it's playing a bass scale on an upright bass. Someone is plucking an upright bass and they are playing a bass scale out of order. They're not literally just playing a scale up and down, but they basically end up playing a full scale out of sequence. And that's why that particular song works, but so would a bass sweep. In fact, a bass sweep would work even better.
Yes, but
So,
audiophiles will never
yes,
listen to bass sweeps. They
I guess
must
so.
believe that the music itself is
It's a,
is what's and
it's
they
a
cannot
special
use.
song.
He starts off with just put away your SPL meter, put away all
Mm-hmm.
your tools, because
Mm-hmm.
this is all you're gonna do this all with the most important tool you have, your ears,
Mm-hmm.
or I like to call it the least accurate thing in your arsenal. But okay, because that's what they want. So honestly, I'm for it, and the fact, and that's they
Mm.
want all these weird rules and stuff, and they're like, I'm sorry, honey, we have to knock out a wall because we need to get proper placement of these speakers, and God forbid we have a sub, because subs are evil. Subs are for that's just for home theater and that crap, that
Yeah, you're
crap.
right. It's funny because, getting linear bass response at the seat, proper imaging, I'm like, of course we're all for those things, and the way they're describing doing it, if for whatever reason you're opposed to ever using a subwoofer in your system, this will work. It's just the way that it's presented is what I object to, not the actual thing itself. That's what's funny about it. I'm like, I can't really take too much umbrage with saying this is one way of correctly positioning the speakers in your room, because that's true.
Well,
It's
this guy's
just
also
why does
selling
it have
something
to be
too,
told
though,
this
Rob. I
particular
mean,
way?
he's selling a product. He goes and does
Yeah,
this for people.
yeah,
So of course he's going to say it's
yeah.
the only way, and that's we're going to get to this later. But somebody says, "Why don't you have a custom installer on your podcast?" Well, that's why, right there. That's the reason. I'm not saying that all custom installers are this way.
Oh
I
gosh,
know
no.
many custom installers that aren't, but that's why. That's why I don't. I mean, that's why I keep, Rob's on here. I'm on here, and believe me, I'm a rarity in the home theater review and uh, uh, editorial market. I have always been uber skeptical of all this nonsense, and it has not made me a lot of friends. And there's a lot of people who absolutely hate me or think I'm an idiot because I don't believe that 192 24-bit is in any way better than CD quality. But they're like, oh, it's clearly better. Look at all those numbers. They're higher. I'm like, yes, it is. They are higher. And you are high as well. Now, Efren also thought that perhaps focusing on room acoustics and careful speaker positioning and setup might be one way for AV Rant listener Mahi from last week or 2 weeks ago uh,
Like 3 weeks ago now.
to feel happier with his Emotiva and Ascend Acoustic Sierra 2 purchase. This is the guy who spent thousands of dollars upgrading. Went, it sounds better, but everyone was also hoping for a more dramatic, the speakers completely disappear type of experience when he got his Sierra 2 speakers, but has come to realize that he has to focus on other aspects of his listening room just as much as the speakers alone in order to get the sound quality he's after. It's a very good point Ephraim is making here,
Hmm.
because what we're seeing, and it's like, okay, what's the thing that's making the biggest difference in your room? Is it the fact that your speakers are of low quality? If that's the thing that's making the biggest difference, upgrading your speakers will make the biggest difference. Is it the fact that your room is a mausoleum that is constructed completely out of stone, Well, then perhaps buying better speakers or buying. We had what's his name from India who was like, I can't get rid of all this tile. What am I going to do? Can I get another subwoofer? I'm like, what did we say? You could. It's not going to make a difference, but you could. You're not going to hear it because it's the room that's making the difference. So it's a very good point Ephraim's making. I hear that if his problem is the room, that's what's jacking up the sound more than the fact that he upgraded his speakers.
I still think it's fair to say, though, that if you started with good speakers and went to something I would call great speakers, that not everyone is going to feel that that was actually worth
Yeah,
the gap in price.
yeah,
That is still entirely fair if someone feels that way.
yeah. I think so too.
Oh
All
yeah.
right, let's move on. John W. on Facebook starts by saying AV Rant is his new favorite podcast. Woohoo!
Yay! Thank you.
Yay! Ah.
We'll see how long that sticks with the way this year's going, but
Yeah, but don't worry, dude. If we can power through all this nonsense we're going through, it's gonna pretty soon we'll be caught up and going, "Hey, we need more questions." He's got an 18-year-old Velodyne VA907, didn't look it up, subwoofer. It's an 8-inch with a 10-inch down-firing passive radiator. He'd like to know if it's time to retire it. Well, I don't know. Do you not like it? Is it making funny noises? I don't know. And he's concerned that any passive radiator might reduce accuracy. That worry about passive radiators also has him worried about his Def Tech SM55 speakers. Also didn't look them up, which have passive radiators on the top of them. Would sealed speakers and subwoofers give him improved accuracy? Um, well, a passive radiator works just very similarly to a port, right?
yes.
So the port is just an opening in your sub that allows air to move in and out. Well, rather than
Hmm.
doing that, you have a passive radiator which moves in and out in the exact opposite direction that your driver is being pushed. So if your driver is sucking in, your passive radiator is pushing out, or your port is pushing air through it.
Hmm.
Okay, so I don't think that it seems like John here has been hearing these audio files talk about how sealed subs are tighter and more accurate, and ported or passive radiators, subs with passive radiators, are more flabbier and boomier. Okay,
Yes, I see things like that written and said.
anytime you hear John or anybody else, anytime you guys hear something that sounds like an absolute, you should always question it. Especially when you're going across different speaker brands. Okay, all sealed subs are tighter than all non-sealed subs. Does, does that sound like it makes sense to you? I mean, can that possibly be true? Are you telling me that if I went to JL Audio and I got one of their ported, was it $10,000, $12,000 subs?
Do they even make a ported sub, JL Audio?
They might not. Okay,
I think that they're all sealed over at
they
JL,
might
I
be.
think.
All right. Let's pretend they didn't. Let's pretend they had a ported sub, right? And then we put it up against, a sealed sub with from SVS. Are you going to tell me that that ported sub from JL Audio is not going to sound just as tight as the one from SVS? I'm going to say that you're on drugs if you think that there's going to be much of a difference. Yeah, do not buy into this whole idea that passive radiators or ported subs are in any way inherently different. Now, the design of a sub may be better or worse based on who designed it and how much money they had to to use in order to get all the parts and the components and stuff like that. You buy $100 sub, I don't care if it's sealed or ported, it's gonna sound like junk. I mean, brand new $100 sub, they just don't have enough money to put the components together so they can make a profit in order to give you something that's gonna punch down to 20 hertz or 25 or 35 or 40 hertz even, without starting to fart out weird sounds. This is not, worrying about whether or not it's the same thing. And people are like, oh well, you can't get aluminum drivers; those sound tinny. Yeah, you can just shut up about all that nonsense. So no,
Yeah, this worry about a subwoofer or a speaker having a passive radiator and that potentially being a reason to avoid it for concerns of accuracy. No, I mean then you would have to avoid all ported speakers and subwoofers too. And I mean, of course, there are some very good sounding ported speakers and subwoofers, just as there are ones with passive radiators. So that is not the concern there. I mean, the passive radiator, like Tom said, is doing the same job as the port, and it's supposed to be at lower frequencies, which start to become omnidirectional anyway. So if you're concerned that, oh, the passive radiator is facing a different direction than the driver, or it's out of phase with the driver, which it is, but
Yeah.
then so is the air moving out of a port. That is also out of phase with the driver. So these things are not an inherent problem. It is a design consideration. You wouldn't want to just slap stuff willy-nilly and then start poking holes and then covering it up with cellophane, and saying, "Oh, there, I created a passive radiator. It's going to sound great." Like, it doesn't work like that. You do have to consider what you're designing, but yeah, it's not an inherent flaw or anything like
Yeah.
that.
It's all a
As
design
for
choice. And it's a
yeah,
design choice based on either, I mean, it could be financial considerations. It could very well be just, hey, this is what I'm used to designing. This is what I'm comfortable with. And therefore,
mhm.
all of my speakers. I mean, look at the guy who, what's his name, who used to design for Atlantic Technology. You could tell one of his speakers from a mile away. You go, oh, look at that. That's one of his. It's boxy. It's got an offset tweeter. That's got to be one of his, right? He always designed them sort of the
Was
same
that
way.
Vance Dickinson?
Vance Dickinson, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of it's just what they're comfortable with. And if they can design a good speaker, it doesn't make any difference. It's a choice that they make for whatever reason. Now, DefTech SM55 speakers, which have passive readers on top of them sounds a little odd to me. But DefTech has always been sort of about that, you know, sort of omnidirectional sound
Well,
thing.
they've also been about trying to make their speakers as full range as possible.
Yeah.
That has very commonly been a goal of theirs.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, like I said, if they can make a good speaker, they can make a good speaker, and they could put passive raters all over the dang thing. But if you're happy with them, then what are you worried about? And no, a sealed speaker and subwoofer will not give him improved accuracy. Will not give you improved accuracy inherently.
yeah, just by virtue of being sealed. No, but I
No.
mean, I will say there are better subwoofers than an 8-inch Velodyne from 18 years ago. That
One would
that
think, yes.
that is a
One would think that
fact. There are
there have
subwoofers.
been some improvements in subwoofer technology since
There
then.
are subs that can play louder and lower than that sub. I guarantee you that. And personally, I think there are speakers that sound better than the DefTech bookshelves from that line. I think that is a thing that could be said, but it's not because of the
Yes.
passive radiator.
To answer your question, no. But to answer the question you did not answer is, should you upgrade? Yes, you probably could and experience greater sound fidelity, but it won't be because you went from passive radiator to sealed. I would not let that just define
Yeah.
any part of my buying decision. Now, to go on, he also wonders whether bipole tower speakers are capable of producing an accurate soundstage. He's intrigued by them, but unsure. Again, by virtue of being a bipole speaker, you are not inherently incapable of doing anything. I mean, electrostatic speakers are inherently a bipole speaker.
Dipole.
Dipole. Yes, dipole.
Hmm.
Um, but the bipole, I don't understand bipole speakers.
Bipole means that both sides
No, I understand, but
push outward at the same time and inward
though
at
I'm
the
trying to
same
think of what speakers are bipole speakers that aren't like,
time. DefTech.
oh god, all right. So they actually have speakers that face backwards and
They actually have drivers that face backwards and they push out at the same time as the forward-facing drivers and
which
pull
is
in
what
at
the
the same
new
time.
Axiom speakers do too, right? That's the same sort of deal.
Yeah, well, I
They
mean, the
call them
Axiom
something
ones are
else.
all DSP controlled,
Yeah.
so they play with the phase to try
See,
and
I've
get
never
it
been a huge fan
work
of this whole
correctly.
dev tech backwards facing driver thing. Never really been a fan of that. But back to the question at hand, which is, can a bipole speaker, tower speaker, can it create an accurate soundstage? Of course it can. Why wouldn't it be able to? If I put a big acoustic absorber behind it, then that bipole part of it just goes away, and I just get a regular old speaker. And there's no reason that can happen. But even if you didn't have that, you had a really reflective room. It's still possible. Listening to a dipole electrostatic speaker, that is a speaker that can create an incredible soundstage. Uh,
At one seat.
yes, but it's still incredible for
Yup.
that one
Mhm.
person. So, you know, yeah,
Yeah,
it can
the way
happen.
I come at this is a little bit different, although if I went strictly by this line of reasoning, then I wouldn't ever recommend planar speakers or electrostatic speakers either. But going by what Floyd Toole wrote in some of his papers, which is basically what do they use when they're making the recordings? Because that is a consideration. You know, they're authoring, they're mastering, they're mixing the recording in a studio somewhere, and essentially none of them use anything other than forward-facing, direct radiating monopole speakers. I mean, that's what's used to make the vast, vast majority of recordings. So if your concern is more along the lines of, I want to hear something very close to what they were satisfied with in the studio when they made the recording, you're probably going to end up using a forward-facing monopole speaker. Just because that's what's being used. But like I say, if you only follow that line of reasoning, then you'd never use electrostatics either, because very rarely are those used in the studio.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole bipole or omnidirectional high frequency thing, I find it a little bit dubious, to be honest. It's
I'll be honest with you. Yeah, I'm with Rob on this. I don't just find it dubious. I feel like it's more of a, hey, we're going to put something so unique on ours that you're going to buy it because of this uniqueness, and you're also going to like it because of this uniqueness. And no matter what you had, if you're going to upgrade from something to us, you're going to like it no matter what. That's why the whole thing with people are like, oh, I got Bose and I love them. Well, of course you do, because you had crap before that. Anything is better than crap. And most people are upgrading. They're getting speakers that are better than what they had before, and they're going to sound better, even if they have some sort of weirdness to them that isn't making them as accurate as they could be. I've always found this whole idea of, and even when we had David Jansen on the podcast, he makes electrostatic speakers and he puts backs on them. He goes, man, having the sound come out of the back, you can't control that. You want everything to come forward so that you know where everything's going to be. It goes up the back. Where does it go? It bounces off the walls. You got to start dealing with that.
well,
So
yeah,
he has
becomes completely
electrostatic
grueling.
speakers that he puts backs on. He's one of the
Mhm.
only people that does that. And that's because he doesn't want that sound in the back of the room where it's just going to come at you at a completely different time and a completely different angle than what you intended. So, yes, it can sound good.
Mhm.
I just don't necessarily think it's the best way to go. Yeah. Lastly, he's read that rock music should be played. Oh, stop reading. Negative 10 dB compared to reference volume, and jazz at negative 5 dB. But he thinks the low end sound lopped off at these levels. Are these good suggestions? No. How does anybody know how loud to play your speakers in your room with your ears? How does anybody know that? I
Yeah,
don't know that.
I'm kind of wondering if, because like when we spoke with Chris Kyriakakis from Odyssey, um, there is the thing that they call reference level offset for their dynamic EQ. Now, that's the thing that's saying with a lot of music, they're not mixing to the same reference level as movies. Reference volume is really a movie industry standard. It's not a music industry standard. So a lot of music is mixed at a different reference volume than movies. So they put into that dynamic EQ part of Odyssey the ability to say, well, this music, if I set it to full reference volume, or rather, if I set my volume somewhere lower than reference volume, but then I use dynamic EQ, the bass is actually going to be enhanced too much because it was already tipped up bass for something like a big rock concert or something like that. And therefore, they allow you to knock it down 5, 10, or 15 decibels, this offset to say, well, if it were boosted as much as I would boost a movie at this volume level, which is some amount below reference volume for movies, then the bass would be overblown. It's being amplified too much to try and compensate. So if that's what he was talking about, then it's possible. But unfortunately, I mean, even Odyssey themselves kind of overgeneralize it by saying, well, this is probably appropriate for rock music. This is probably appropriate for, classical music. But even then, it's still recording to recording. You can't really tell. What you can do is say, okay, I turned it up to full reference volume. There, now dynamic EQ isn't doing anything. It's not adjusting the bass whatsoever. It's just playing it through. Here's how it sounds. Okay, now I turn the volume down. Does the bass sound abnormally louder or quieter than all the other frequencies now? And if it does, then you can use that reference level offset to bring it back in line, sort of wrestle it back in line. But it's a bit of trial and error. It depends on the recording. So yeah, this whole thing about always listening to rock at 10 decibels below reference, no way. That just isn't something you can
I,
follow. It's not a
I don't
rule.
even know how you could come. I don't know why anybody would have said that. I could see no more than, or you know what I mean, or you know what I mean. I could see that, but why would that be though? That's it. Turn it there. You don't touch your knob
Mm.
anymore. Really? Because I can't talk in this room anymore. I would like to be able to talk in this room, but I can't because I'm listening to rock music. Oh, look at that! I'm listening to jazz. Now my ears are ringing. Well, that's fantastic. This is a fantastic situation. No, yeah, just listen to yourself at that point. You're like he says it right there. He thinks the low end sounds lopped off at these levels. Well, if they sound
Hmm.
lopped off, turn it up, okay, or adjust it in some way. Why are you listening to whoever these people are that are online? I mean, I know we're online, but we're telling you to listen to yourself. That should tell you something right there. You know, if it doesn't make sense to you, then it doesn't make sense. Period. If it makes you think, huh, then you should be thinking, huh, why is this making? Why are they saying this crazy stuff? You know. But then again, our placement for our subwoofer placement suggestions don't make sense intuitively, but we go through great pains over and over again to explain why they do make sense. And basically, we just go read this research article, and there you go. Now, Kevin won't be buying new speakers for about a year, but he started browsing. He believes he will likely need to mount the speakers close to a wall, but that has led him to mostly look at front-ported speakers, but he's wondering if he should really place that constraint upon himself. What are the actual advantages and disadvantages of front-ported speakers versus rear-ported versus sealed? And are there real reasons to choose one design over the others? Inherently, like we were saying before, no. There's no reason to choose front versus side versus rear versus top versus bottom ported versus passive radiator versus sealed inherently. In your case, the reason why people often say don't get rear ported is because those speakers were never designed to have that port right next to a boundary, and that boundary reinforcement will bloat the bass. You'll get more bass than that was intended by the speaker designer. Okay, then then that you're now no longer getting what they designed. It's now going to sound funny, and you're going to have to fix it in some other way. That maybe that your Odyssey has to do something, or depends on what kind of other
Right,
stuff
you
you
put
have
the
going on.
crossover point higher. Yeah, I mean, one way you can even think about it is if you took the speaker and turned it around so that the forward-facing drivers are now shooting into the wall, would you want to put that 1 or 2 inches in front of the wall and play your speaker like that? I mean, intuitively, this is one where intuition does work. We know that's going to sound awfully weird if you took a speaker, turned it around backwards, and fired it into the wall only 2 inches away from the wall. Whereas if you turned a speaker, turned it around backwards, but kept it a foot away from the wall, if you moved around to the side, it wouldn't actually, I mean, it'll sound a little bit weird, but it wouldn't sound crazy weird, not the way it would if it's only 1 or 2 inches from the wall. So, same thing is happening there from the port. The port is making sound. You can almost think of it like another driver. So, it is making sound. If you stuck that only 1 or 2 inches away from a wall, it's going to sound weird, and that's all there is to it. So, having the port on the front instead is kind of like having another driver on the front, which means it won't sound so weird. You might still get some boundary reinforcement. The bass might still be tipped up a little bit too much because those sound waves are wrapping around the speaker and hitting the wall still. But it's better than having a sound generating area right there next to the wall.
But that's going to happen with the sealed design as well. So if you
Mm-hmm.
have a sealed speaker and you put it against the wall, well, it's the bass is still wrapping around the speaker and
Mm-hmm.
still being bloated slightly, just not as bad as if you have a port that's firing directly into that wall.
Mm-hmm.
So that said, you should be thinking if you are planning on doing this of either front ported or sealed, and that will minimize the interaction with that rear port and the
Mm-hmm.
wall. You can also look at there's a lot of speakers out there, not a lot, but there are some whose they have switches on the back of them that allow you to change essentially the crossover and or the or the frequency response so that the bass is adjusted for close to wall placement. And speakers like that would do you very well because then you would have that option of saying, hey, you know what, it's close to a wall. Here's the switch, flip it to this thing, and then oh well, I've moved or I'm moving the speaker someplace else. Now I can flip it to no boundary, no wall reinforcement there, and that will help you out. Those speakers are a little bit more rare, but they do exist, so you can look into those as well.
Yeah, for Kevin asking, if he should place the constraints upon himself by only looking at front ported or sealed speakers, I mean, I'd say you don't have to, but you sort of can because there are lots of very good options that have that design. So it's not as though you can't find a really good sounding speaker that is not rear ported.
Yeah,
So I don't really have a problem with saying, yeah, actually go ahead and place that constraint on yourself because chances are if you have a speaker that was designed to be rear ported and doesn't have any switches and nowhere does the manufacturer ever say, yeah, go ahead and plug that port, it'll be fine, because usually that isn't something you want to do. It's just not going to sound the way it was designed to sound when
yeah.
it's rear ported and stuck right next to a wall. So yeah,
Rob
I'd
makes a
say
good
go ahead and
point
place the
in that
constraint.
you have lots of options. If you were to come
Hmm.
to us and say, I have to have a sub that's sealed in 12 by no bigger than the 12-inch cube, and I need it to fill 3,600 cubic feet, I would say, you've really limited yourself here, sir. You would have a real problem trying to find someone that could do that. It would be 1,000 pounds of amp alone. It would just be, I mean, it would just be crazy. Um, but in this case, that's not the case. You've got oodles and oodles and oodles of options. So just shop away and just know that just because you're not considering any of these rear-ported ones does not mean that you aren't listening to speakers that are just as fantastic as the rear-ported options that are out there. All right, Andrew. He heard us say that the answer is 2.2 when it comes to how we would set up a two-channel only listening system. It
Hmm.
is 2.2, meaning
Hmm.
two speakers, two subs. If that's the case, why do tower speakers even exist? Why do supercars exist? Because somebody will buy them. If a bookshelf speaker can be less expensive, easier to place, more rigid, and sound just as good, what advantages do tower speakers offer? Do you want to stop there or we want to keep going?
Well, I mean, Byron's is the same, so we may as well just
Okay, so
lump it all together.
Byron, do I have to skip down? No,
No, no, no.
you,
I
you
mean,
you put it you
same
put it in
question.
here.
I lumped it
Byron,
together.
who's we're going to talk a little bit more about less, asked almost the exact same question. He looked at the specs of his towers and saw that the three woofers cross over up to the mid-range driver at 120 hertz. Isn't using three woofers to go from 80 hertz to 20 hertz kind of a waste? Yeah, we'll stop right there. I've thought the same thing myself, to be honest with you. Okay, first of all, why are there tower speakers? Because not everybody has a subwoofer or wants one. Let's start with that.
And because, I mean, your speakers do need to stand up. I mean, this is a question way down somewhere lower,
Yeah,
but they do need to be at the point where the tweeter is at the same height as your ears. So if you're using bookshelf speakers, they're going to be on some kind of stand. They're not going to be sitting right on the floor. So towers you can sort of think of as being an integrated stand. In fact, there are some speakers out there that really are just a bookshelf speaker on a stand that they call a tower.
I know.
Uh,
I love it when they call it a tower and you look at it, you go, "What's this shelf in the middle here?" Oh, well, yeah, we didn't need that internal volume. I'm like, so basically, you're only using the top third of that speaker, and the rest of it is just empty space. They're like,
just
well,
the stands,
it's
yeah.
it creates some acoustical.
But the main reason that tower speakers have a legitimate place existing, aside from just the fact that many people want them and buy them, so it makes good business sense to offer them, you can fit more drivers or larger drivers into a tower form factor, and that allows you to have speakers that play louder. So that is a legitimate reason to have it. And when we're talking about something like having three bass drivers that, supposedly cross over at 120 hertz to the mid-range driver, well, it is a crossover, so they're continuing to play all the way up to at least 240 hertz, probably even a bit higher. So it isn't quite the same as just subwoofer frequencies. But it's also the fact that as we go lower and lower in frequency, it takes more and more surface area to produce the same volume as higher frequencies because they start to become omnidirectional. So you need all that surface area. If you want to have equal loudness from top to bottom, you just need a lot of surface area, even if we're only talking about 240 hertz down to 80, where they're going to, or actually down to about 40,
I was going to say it's going to
because,
cross
again,
over
they're
lower
crossing
than
over.
80 too, so they are playing lower.
Yeah, so
Um,
it's more of a range, and there actually is a legitimate reason to have them if you need that output. And a lot of times we don't. I mean, I've said several times on the podcast, I'm a fan of large bookshelf speakers rather than towers for the exact reasons that were mentioned. You can build a more rigid cabinet, they can cost less because it's just less material, and they're easier to position. So I like large bookshelf speakers when I want a speaker that can play loud because I don't need it to play down to 20 hertz. I'm going to cross it over anyway.
Yeah. A lot of times too, you find out that hey, well, first of all, people just like them, like tower speakers. But
Yep.
if you want a speaker stand that looks as good as your large bookshelf speaker that Rob's talking about, you might as well have bought the tower because it's going to cost about the same.
Yeah.
So there, right there is a really legitimate reason to buy one too. You're like, well, I don't really need all this speaker, but the fact of the matter is it's cheaper than buying them the one set of stands that I really like. So all right, to go on. Andrew was also interested to know if Tom or Rob own any vintage gear. He'd like to know if we think the sound quality can be just as good or better than current gear. He owns a Sui
Sansui. Yeah.
G6700 himself that he loves. I looked at those pictures. That's a pretty sexy piece of gear. Um, I don't. My parents were never really all that into hi-fi,
Hmm.
and that's usually where that sort of gear comes from. I'm not going to go out and buy older stuff and then go through the hassle of integrating it into my system just to see whether or not I like it. Do I think it can sound as good? Uh, Depending on what your sources are, I think that certainly there certainly can be some really good sounding stuff that's out there, depending on how old you're talking about. Older stuff in my opinion, tends to be less linear because of what sort of amps they were using. Amplifier technology matured. It's not a recent, it's been mature for a while, but it's not super recent. A lot of these older stuff that was called Class A and stuff like that, there's going to be a lot of nonlinearity in there that I would be concerned about personally. You're not going to have stuff like, of course, room correction or a lot of times bass management of any kind that you
Hmm.
have to worry about. So can it sound good? I'm sure it can sound fantastic. Can it, would I choose to go out and get some for like a two-channel system? No, because it's going to be 2.2. 2.2 means I need something a little bit more recent. Uh, but it looks nice, and I don't know, man. I've always kind of had a soft spot for tubes just because I think they look cool. I think I'd plug them in and not use them for anything.
You like hide the thing that's actually making the sound in the cabinet,
Yeah.
like below it, with the
Yep.
doors closed, so no one can tell. You can
That's
just see
right.
the glowing tubes up top. Yeah, I don't own any vintage gear unless you consider a Pioneer Kuro TV vintage at this point. It's
It is
kind
kind
of
of
vintage.
vintage. It's a relic of a bygone age of plasma.
Okay. Yes, that's right. Yeah, it belongs in a museum now. Um, yeah, I mean, can vintage gear sound better than some current gear? Sure, some, but at the same time, some new gear can sound better than some vintage gear too. So it's
I think
like
a lot
it's
of
not
new
a
gear can sound better than
yeah.
vintage gear.
It's
That's why
kind of
it's
like how like
new.
you could go out and buy a Hyundai now that would smoke like the fastest car from 1950. Like
Yeah.
it's just just because
Or
it's
one of
new
those like little what's that Toyota knockoff brand? It's not a knockoff brand. The
what like Scion.
Scion, yeah. This like a little Scion sports car. Can you imagine
Hmm.
taking that back to like the 50s or 40s and just like getting on the racetrack going, "I'm sorry, CD is playing. I can't hear you as I'm lapping you." Uh,
Yeah, just because something is new and cheap, it doesn't mean like because I think what happens a lot of time is sometimes people get the vintage gear and it's the old, oh, they don't make them like this anymore.
Look how
Like you
heavy it
hear that.
is. Yeah,
Yeah, you hear that kind of line, right? And
because
it's
it
like,
uses actual
uh,
transistors.
yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, honestly, the sound quality that comes out of like an iPod Nano kind of smokes almost every single thing that could have been called a portable player from a long time ago.
Oh my God, I just remember my old
So,
Walkmans and how bad they
yeah,
sounded.
yeah,
But then again, I'm not dissing your gear, dude. If you love it, it's
absolutely.
fine with me. He also says he was comparing some albums that he owns on both vinyl and remastered XR CDs. He preferred the vinyl, finding them less harsh. I'm trying not to roll my eyes right now. He's wondering if we ever had similar experiences. Uh,
Yep.
of Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no reason why that can't be true or wouldn't
Hmm.
be true. I'm sorry, the thing that you need to really kind of focus on is the remastered.
Hmm.
Remastered. That means it's different than the
Hmm.
master that was for the LP. And not only that, the vinyl every time you played it got a little bit more degraded, and God knows how much it sounded like the original. Now that may sound really good on your system. That may be a form of EQ that's really working well for you. Whereas a remastered one sounds exactly the way it was supposed to sound when it first came out. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's supposed to
No, I
sound really
mean,
good with Super
I
Tweak.
have heard plenty of, CD versions where it seems like the goal they had in mind was to extract as much detail as they possibly could from the original tapes. And as a result, they do sound harsh because the
Yeah.
tapes themselves couldn't properly capture those higher frequencies. So there's a bunch of noise up there and there's a bunch of hash up there and stuff. But for whatever reason, they decided, let's try and get as much detail out of it. I mean, it's the same as sometimes you'll see a Blu-ray that looks really grainy, and then other times you'll see ones that look like plasticky smooth. And either way, they look weird, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody had the idea in mind that, oh, we're taking this from film and we're going to try to preserve all the film grain, or we're trying to eliminate all the film grain. And either way, it ends up looking weird. But that, you can't say Blu-ray is the reason that movie looks weird, or CD is the reason this album sounds weird. It was a choice somebody made in what they put onto that storage medium. And there are absolutely times where I've heard an LP version that I think sounds way better than the CD version.
Can I
But that
just
doesn't mean it's
say
inherently
before we
because of
go on, if
storage.
I hear one more person talk about mono recordings as being something that we should be interested in, I'm gonna punch somebody in the face.
Well, I mean,
I
I'm
am
fine with
so
the
no. Shut up.
no, no
Mono, are you
record.
freaking kidding me? I'm about ready to strangle somebody.
No, I mean recorded in mono originally,
I
played
don't
back in
care.
mono now. I'm fine with
Uh,
that. I mean, I'm all for give me whatever the thing was. I'm
oh,
all for
give me a
that.
break. It's fine. It's fine. I will never buy anything that was originally recorded in mono. I know that, all right? But I'm just tired of people talking about how mono is a thing that I should be interested in. I'm not. I'm barely interested in stereo. I'm interested in stereo in that it is portable and it goes really well with headphones. But the minute I get into my home theater, stereo is something I will experience if that was the original recording. But if it wasn't, I am not interested in compressing it down to stereo or hearing the stereo version of it. Shut up. Give me surround sound. Mono. Oh, God. All right. Sorry, had to get off my chest. Andrew wants us to play the YouTube favorite bass I Love You track on our systems to let him know how it sounds with our dual subwoofer systems. Rob, have you done this?
No,
Me
I'm
neither.
sorry.
All right.
I
Anyways,
I
I've
haven't.
listened to many very heavy bass track things. I'm gonna find this and put
Yes, me
this on
too.
our YouTube playlist. I think it might be
I think
already
you
on
might
there.
already have it. I mean,
In
it's
which case,
it's
I have listened to it and it sounded like this. I think I'm going to break my window. Because that's what it sounds like when I play a lot of bass in here. It starts to shaking over there, and I can't do anything about that. And I get a little worried. Lastly, he wants to know if Rob H has a last name or if he's just cousin to Kenny G. Rob, do you have a last name?
I do have a last name, believe it or not. On my driver's license, it doesn't just say H. But
That would be
I mean,
awesome.
you know what? If you go back to like my first ever appearance on AV Rant, if it means that much to you, you can go back there, and I believe I actually said my last name on there. But I am going to maintain an air of mystery. It's not like it's a super duper secret, but
I was gonna
I don't
say
share a lot of my private life. I
that's
just
all
don't.
right. You don't have to. If you don't want
Nope.
people to know your last name, that's
It's out
fine.
there. You can find it. I've told you how. You just have to
My
dig
wife
back
gets
through the
mad
back
every time I
catalog.
mention my kids' names, and I'm like, yeah, well, just put it on the list of things you're mad
It's
at me
it's
about.
it's a bit like Kenny G. He has a name that's like a little bit weird and people never pronounce it correctly, so
But
that's
your
the
last name
reason.
isn't weird. You just don't want people to know
It's
it.
not people never pronounce it correctly though. So
Do I not pronounce it correctly? Have I
I
ever
don't know. I
pronounced
don't think
it?
you've ever said my last name out
Say my name.
loud.
That's good. Write that down so that could be the name of the podcast. Say my name.
I
Byron is wondering about reference volume level and the 105 dB peaks that it calls for. Do all speakers need to be able to hit those 105 dB peaks? No. Does having acoustic treatment? I mean, they don't have to. There's a law, right? Nobody's going to come around and like the speaker police are going to come to your. I'm sorry, sir. These speakers do not hit 105 dB peaks. You have to smash them. Does having acoustic treatments affect how you calculate how many dB you should be able to hit from a certain distance? Shall I continue? He's
let's
concerned.
go back and answer
Yeah.
them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right.
so
Go ahead.
this do all speakers need to be able to hit the 105 dB peaks. Well, I mean, if you want to be in compliance with the idea of reference volume, then yes. But it's very important to know that like peaks mean peaks. It's supposed to, unless it's Transformers: Age of Extinction, peaks is supposed to be a fleeting moment where it gets that loud, not a continuously that loud type of experience. And we are talking about at your seat because sometimes you'll see a speaker and in the specs it'll say maximum output 105 dB, or you can work it out based on the efficiency and the maximum power rating that it says it can absorb. You can work out how loud it get, but that will be at 1 meter.
Yeah.
So very often you're sitting further away than 1 meter. So the 105 dB peaks, that really it was supposed to be per channel, right? So now we're getting into object-based audio with things like Atmos and DTS:X, where channels don't really exist anymore. But the idea was in a movie theater, you have multiple surround speakers lining the side walls and multiple speakers along the back, and that channel, all of those speakers combined, should be able to hit 105 dB peaks. So sometimes you'll see things in white papers for setting up a cinema where it says like, oh, you're going to have 6 surround speakers, so they only need to be able to hit 93 or something like that, because cumulatively they'll hit 105. But of course, at home, most of us are only using one speaker per channel, so technically it should be able to hit 105 dB at your seat. That would be the ideal.
Yes. Does it
Yeah.
have to? No, it doesn't
No,
have
it
to.
doesn't have to, because I'm
Doesn't have to.
very few
Especially if
people
you put
like
your
to listen
speaker
to.
halfway across a great room from yourself. It
Yeah.
probably won't. Okay. So I mean, so it doesn't have to.
So
And
yeah, so the second part, yeah, the acoustic treatments calculating. So I know because Byron gave some numbers that when he was working it out, he was using what they call like 4 pi space calculation, which means the speaker on a 50-foot pole in the middle of nowhere. That would be a 4 pi calculation. There is no boundary reinforcement whatsoever, not even the ground beneath it. And in that instance, every time you double your distance from the speaker, you lose 6 dB of output. That's
right.
what is going on. So okay, that's fine. But in your room, it isn't like that. In your room, you're not losing 6 dB of output every time you double your distance from the speaker. You're losing something closer to 3 or 4 dB. Now, if your room is really, really heavily treated, you got tons of absorption in there, maybe you'll be closer to that 4 dB number. If you have a very lively room, maybe it'll only be 2 or 3 dB that it actually effectively drops every time you double your distance. So can it have some impact? Yeah, but if you just sort of say every time I double my distance, I lose about 3 dB of output, you'll be in the ballpark whether you're acoustically treated or not. It's going to be like give or take a dB.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's concerned because his front speakers are the EMP Tech R5B eyes. What's that? Are those
Those are
those
their
thin towers?
bookshelf.
Oh,
Those are the Impression Series bookshelf
oh, they
speakers.
are. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're rated at 85 dB, 1 watt, 1 meter, and say they use 50 to 100 watts, but they're 13 feet away from a seat. How could they ever hit 105 dB? I'm not doing that math, by the way.
Okay, so that means with 1 watt, because I mean 13 feet is essentially 4 meters. So you've doubled your distance once, doubled your distance twice. He's lost about 6 dB at this point. So 1 watt is producing about 79 dB. So you go, okay, that's 1 watt. You multiply that by 10, which will give you 10 more dB. So 10 watts gives you 89. 100 watts gives you 99. 200 watts, you've doubled it. That would give you 3 dB more, so you're at 102. And 400 watts. So, okay, he would have to pump 400 watts into those speakers from that distance to hit at 105 dB. And he says, oh, it says on their spec sheet they only go from 50 to 100. But that is 50 to 100 continuous. That is, I'm pumping 100 watts into it the entire time, which, as we just explained, means it can play 99 dB continuously from that distance at his seat. That's really, really loud, especially for a surround or a height speaker. That's just not happening. Could those speakers, for a moment, for a fleeting moment, take 200 or 400 watts? They probably could. Most speakers, if you take their continuous wattage rating, they can absorb around twice, maybe 4 times as much. It depends a little bit. But so, I mean, he has some right to say, can he hit those 105 dB peaks? You probably wouldn't want to be blasting him that loud all the time because that's 400 watts at his distance. But they could probably actually do it. That's the amazing thing. They could probably actually do it for a fleeting moment.
And this is why you want to have what we call good amplification. This is amplification
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to freak out if you tried to throw 400 watts through it real quick.
Yep.
or 200 watts through it real
That's
quick.
having a
And,
nice big capacitor bank so it can go, okay, boom, here's all your power, and now I charge back up.
yeah, when that peak goes away and you're only putting 10 watts into it or 50 watts into it. All right. So it was at the end of this. Yes. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
now we're on to last week. That was 2 weeks ago.
Yup.
Now we're up to last week, which I should have
Woo!
started with Lee last week, but that wasn't happening. This is not in chronological order, but Ashley posted on Facebook that turning off HDMI CEC on his PS3 and Sony 3D display got 3D and 24 frame per second playback working, even though his monoprice HDMI switch, even through, I'm sorry, his monoprice HDMI switch. So basically, he was going, "Oh, this thing's broken," and Rob thought it was HDMI CEC, and Rob was right.
Which
I thought.
I'm not even happy that I'm right. I'm like, really? Really again? That actually was the problem? Like
That's
I'm
because
still I'm
I
still
always forget about that because it's never really plagued me that often. Occasionally, HDMI-CC has plagued me, and I'm always like, "What the heck is going on?" And then I figure it out.
yeah,
But turning it off certainly makes my life easier. It's just something I wish it would default to off, but unfortunately, that's not
I'm
the
still waiting for someone to be like, yeah, I turned it all off and I still have this problem. Be like, oh, okay, all right, finally a problem. I'm like, I'm kind of disappointed when that's the stupid problem.
yeah.
Oh, it's easy.
All right, so this is going to be an extended question, I
Hmm.
think, because it looks like it goes on for like a page. Uh, Nikhil, is that what we're going with?
Yeah, I'm going with that.
Yeah, Nikhil wrote us a few weeks ago to start the process of spending 5 grand on this approximately 14 foot by 14 foot by 10 foot medium room. Those are some fantastic dimensions.
It's not
Now,
exactly that, so it
uh,
isn't actually like a square. It's just
well,
kind of
it's pretty squarish. It was already
close.
pre-wired for speakers when you bought the house, but all the wires were way up high. I remember this guy. We said,
Hmm.
move now. Uh, Here's some updates. First, it did some temporary speaker and subwoofer placement just to try out some of our advice. After placing two of his subwoofers in opposing corners and manually adjusting their volumes to the same levels, they did become difficult to localize and sounded more uniform. And setting all of his speakers to an 80 hertz crossover after running the auto setup has resulted in the system sounding the best he's ever heard it. Again, not intuitive to put in the corners and goes against what other people say, but they're wrong, we're right. He went up into the attic and found no insulation at all over the media room.
Which
Oh,
means it was probably an addition done by the previous homeowner, and that shouldn't be the way it is. That's
no,
not good to have no insulation in your attic.
no. You should, well, it's tricky getting from the attic access over the top of the media room, but once there, it would actually be very easy to run new speaker wires down the bays of the walls. So he's left it to his wife to decide if that's important to her that no wires be visible around the perimeter of the room. Now, once you've done that, put some insulation up there, dude. Okay? All right.
Hmm.
There you go. It's not that expensive. Just get some of that roller stuff or whatever. Nikhil visited a local store that does installations. They tried to upsell him on cables. Their demo was placing a finger on the bare end of a cable that was plugged into a subwoofer and comparing how much hum was created. And apparently, to them, more hum was better. If you did not go running screaming from that store after that demo, I do not know how you managed to keep a straight face. I would have just been like, I would have completely lost it. It would have been hilarious. The cheapest equipment they were selling was 3 grand plus. He figures that instead of hiring an installer, he'll get the room sounding as good as he can on his own. If there's some handyman stuff needed after that to just hide some wires, he can easily hire someone to do that. Yes, sir. We will. Hey, for free. We will do this for you. We'll tell you where to put stuff. Don't worry. We're not charging you nothing. You only, hey, I say this all the time. I don't think people believe me, but you do not have to donate to this podcast. You do not think that all these people donated. They just ask questions. They go on with their lives. All right. Second, well, I don't know, fourth, he emailed Gick Acoustics, and they recommended quite a lot of corner bass trapping, treating their front wall rather heavily with absorption, and then placing panels at the reflection points on the side walls. All that seems to jive quite well with our recommendations. But they had a difference of opinion on where to place the subwoofers. They recommended both subwoofers in the two rear corners, or one subwoofer in one rear corner, and the other subwoofer on the front wall, but more towards the center of the wall. What gives? From Gick Acoustics room setup general no-nos page at blah, 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 it says, don't put a sub in a corner if you can help it. Almost never is this even close to the best place for a sub. While it will yield the most shear output, it will also yield the least smooth frequency response curve. What gives? Okay.
What gives?
What gives is that that's really old advice, and it's actually true if you're talking about one sub. But once you give two subs, the new advice is what we're saying. This is the newest, latest research that's been done. It blew everybody's mind when it came out, and apparently it hasn't made it to Gig Acoustics yet. Why? Well, why not? They're too busy selling room treatments, and they're right on all the other stuff. And we are in agreement there. It's only where the subwoofer placement is. Uh, and I would go to a acoustical panel place to ask them where to place my subs, like I would go to a speaker place to ask them where to put my room treatments. All right? Well, let's just say that. And lastly, I think most importantly, you already tried it and it worked. So why would you even worry about what they had to say? So,
Well, because then I guess it brings up the worry that maybe where they said to put the acoustic treatments was not correct either,
no,
or something along those lines. But I mean, we have to say, this was a couple weeks ago, right? SVS still has a web page up saying put two subwoofers in the two front corners, even though if you talk to them, that's not what they tell you anymore. So yes, unfortunately, some of the older advice is still floating around out there, and it was very common advice, and it all came from the idea that the subwoofers acted like speakers do, meaning each one was independently producing its own sound. So that's where they got this idea of, well, you put one on the front wall sort of in the middle, and that will give you sort of more even coverage, and then you put one in, say, the rear corner, and that will give you the loudness, as though they worked independent of one another, and one did one thing and one did another. But we know that that isn't how it works because the bass sound waves are so long that they all just interact, and what you end up hearing is never the direct sound from one or the other, or a combination of the two like it's stereo. It isn't. It's one gigantic big bass wave that's bouncing all around your room before it ever reaches your ear. So it all works together, and that's why this across the room from one another, diagonally across from each other type of placement actually works, even though it's not intuitive. So that's what
you do
gives.
not have to go back very far in this podcast to hear me giving advice like this because that's what everybody
Right.
believed back then. You
Yeah.
do not have to go very. I have made an about face on this, and it's only because one, I read the research and it made sense once I read it. Number two, I tried it.
Mm-hmm.
You've done the second part, so let's just stick with that.
Oh yeah.
Um,
If you go back a few years, I was like making plans to have a subwoofer beneath each speaker. Because I was believing in this idea of wouldn't it be great if every single speaker could play entirely full range, and
Lee,
then
you
the
should be
sound would
listening to this. Lee,
and
listen to
then the
this.
sound would be coming from where it's supposed to come from, right? I thought, oh, if there's a bass note that is recorded and mixed into my left surround speaker, shouldn't that be where the bass emanates from, right? I mean, intuitively that seems to make sense, but nope. I had two subwoofers up front in my system. I had that before, and as I moved from my left seat to my middle seat to my right seat, the bass changed. And I went, that why aren't these two subwoofers doing what I thought they would do? I put them at the midpoints of my two side walls. Suddenly, I can't even tell where the subwoofers are and the subwoofers end and the speakers begin. And I'm like, that it makes no sense. I can reach out and touch a subwoofer now, but I can't tell it's physically right there beside me. It kind of seems like magic, but it works.
That's that's really the proof in the pudding right there. You try
Mm-hmm.
it and it works.
Mm-hmm.
Literally do not have to listen to anybody else at that point. You're like, and even if they'll give you crap about it, you're like, well, it works in my room. Maybe it doesn't work in your room. More likely, you
Yep.
didn't try it in your room because I tried it in my room and it works. And everybody else seems to agree with me, including people that have doctorates. So, what's your exact expertise other than it makes sense to put speakers under subs underneath every speaker? Uh, yeah. Anyhow, all right. Is that enough of that nonsense? Yes. Okay. So here's we're still with Nikhil here.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yes. I must make sure everybody else realizes that. Uh, these are his actual questions. And there's A through E. He connected two subwoofers with a digital coaxial cable and a coaxial analog splitter that he got from Radio Shack. What's the difference between a digital versus analog coaxial cable? Marketing, branding.
Sometimes the shield. Sometimes the shielding. It might be a foil. Sometimes it might be sort of a braided type of thing. But
Effectively, though, it shouldn't be
effectively, they're the same.
the same.
Effectively,
It's
there is
copper.
a
You'd be
yeah
surprised
a
how
lead down the middle.
really copper doesn't really care whether or not your signal is digital or analog. You would be surprised how much it doesn't really care what the electricity going through it actually.
If you go over to bluejeanscable.com, they have a series, like they have tons of fantastic articles. Now,
They
Kurt
do.
Denke used to be a lawyer, and you can tell because he writes even longer articles than I would write, and that is really saying something. That man can really, really write in the
You
long
could
article.
really put 5 words where one would do.
Yeah, but they really explain, like, if really getting into the nitty gritty detail of why a certain type of shield. It all has to do with what frequencies are being carried. At really high frequencies, which would be more like a digital signal, really high frequencies, one type of shield is a little bit more effective at blocking out radio frequency interference, whereas at low frequencies, like a subwoofer is carrying, or any speaker for that matter, I mean, 20 kilohertz is a really low frequency
Right.
compared to several megahertz. Um, then the other type of shield is better at blocking out electromagnetic interference, which might be what would be picked up at those frequencies. So that's the technical, but effectively either type can carry the signal just fine. It's a lead down the middle, a dielectric around it, and then a shield around that. So a coaxial
Are
cable is a coaxial
you
cable.
picking up radio signals with your subwoofer? Because if you're not, don't worry about it. That's
Yep.
basically that's the proof. That's again the proof in the pudding right there. If you are picking up the radio or shortwave or something like that with your subwoofer, then
Mm-hmm.
you should think about getting a different cable with a
Yep.
different.
With a
Uh,
proper shield.
but that's really not going to be the case. Second, B. For the crossover knob on the subwoofer, should you turn it to the highest frequency possible and let the receiver do the crossover thing? I like the thing. That part of it was my favorite part of the question. And the answer is yes, of course. That's exactly what
Yes.
you do. Or if it has a button that allows you to switch it to bypass.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, on my EP500, I think the bypass one sometimes, the bypass setting sometimes hummed or made some sort of weird thing. So I
Yeah, that'd
just,
be Axiom. Yeah.
yeah, VX. That happened after some time. And I moved all the way to Australia at that point, so whatever. I didn't care anymore. For subwoofer, skip one. No, C. For subwoofer speaker and HDMI wiring in the wall, does he need to use special cables? Well, yes. Each
You
one has
should.
their own type. Subwoofer should be coaxial. Speaker should be your normal
No, I
speaker.
think he means in wall rated, right? Because there are ones that are
Oh,
rated for
plenty of
in wall
rated.
use.
Yeah, or in-wall rated.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, plenum is an air return, but
Yeah.
so you don't
Plenum, though, if you
necessarily
got
need
plenum,
that.
you're covered all over the
Yeah,
place.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And it's not really that much more expensive than using, you know, whatever in-wall ones are. But yes, you
yeah.
should be
Much like
using.
how you should have insulation in your attic, you should use in-wall rated speakers if you're running them inside a wall, and you should use plenum rated speakers if they're going inside an air return. So yeah,
Wires,
those are yeah wires. Yeah.
not speakers. You don't want to put speakers
Yeah,
in
so
your
that is a
other
case
room.
where don't just get the super duper cheapest thing you can and then run it inside the wall. Because if you ever, I mean, I don't know how that would ever create a fire because this is low power stuff. I mean, it's not like an
If it
electrical wire,
shorts
but
out, it's literally going to not even create a spark. I mean, it's just gonna stop working. It's just not really, really dangerous. But then again, if you don't want to, if you don't want to take a chance with your house burning down and your homeowner's insurance and all that stuff,
it's
not
mostly the insurance part of it. Because
yeah,
somebody will come in and say, "Oh, you didn't use the correct rating, and that's why this happened," even though it didn't. So yeah, just cover your behind and
yeah.
say use in wall rated cables.
Yes. On the THX site, it says to put the main speakers at ear level. He has Tower Andrew Jones first gen speakers. Does the middle of the tower need to be at ear level? When they say put it at ear level, they mean the tweeter.
Hmm.
And this is the problem I had with the speakers from Australia, where they got the whatever the heck they were called. I can't even remember anymore. But they were short, and they were like built for like those really low, like European style couches,
Mm.
and that put the tweeter, like I had to sit on the ground in order
Hmm.
for the tweeter to be at ear level. And when I did that, they sounded better than when I did not do that.
Hmm.
But yes, that talking about the tweeter.
Well, you could rake them, Tom. You could rake
I
them
could
back.
rake them. I could
Hmm.
throw them out in the yard and pick them up with a rake. That's exactly what I would do with them. Yes. I hated those speakers
But
with
yes,
a
no,
passion.
they're not talking about the physical middle of the speaker. That's not what they're talking about. The tweeter. And I mean, sometimes there are speakers where they have a driver above the tweeter. And and maybe a driver below the tweeter as well, or something like that. But you're worried about the tweeter. That should be at ear
Yeah.
height.
I mean, we've seen speakers that have had like the RBHs, the ones they used to have, where they had four tweeters, and then like
Mm.
drivers, like a bunch of drivers on top and a bunch of drivers on bottom. You want to put those tweeters where your ears are.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to worry about is the tweeters.
Yeah.
Lastly, I think
Mm-hmm.
yes. This is also from the THX site. It says the front speakers are supposed to be 45 degrees from listening position. If we did this, the speakers would hit the side walls before the front wall. How should these be positioned?
So this is a little bit of confusion. 45 degrees in the THX recommendation is the total spread from the left speaker to the right speaker. We're not talking about the distance from center to left or right.
Yeah, that would
If
be
that's the
90
case, we're talking.
degrees. The
Yeah,
speakers would
yeah,
be,
that's right.
you would be an equilateral triangle at this point.
It's
Not
a
what you
right angle triangle, yeah. So no, so if you're looking straight ahead center at your center speaker at your TV, it's 22 and a half degrees to the left, 22 and a half degrees to the right, or following the Dolby guidelines or DTS guidelines or anything, it's anywhere between 22 to 30 degrees to the left, 22 to 30 degrees to the right. So a total of 45 to 60 degrees between the left and right speakers. So if you follow that, then you won't be banging into your side walls
Yeah, you'd be fine.
before the front wall. Yeah.
Or you
Easy
do
to
what I
confuse
do.
though.
You just go, I'm a couple of feet away from every wall. And then where is
And
that
about,
in relation to
six
me?
to 8 feet apart. Yeah,
Yeah,
roughly.
60 feet apart. Looks about right. That's how I
Cool.
do it. And I'm a professional, boss. All right. Yay, we can talk about somebody else. Nikhil, I hope we answered all of your questions. James says he discovered AV Rant on YouTube. I can't believe that, but yes, a short while ago. I can't believe that after he discovered us on YouTube, he kept watching because these videos are just not the highest quality. And he's enjoying our common sense advice. Thank you. He's been a custom installer since 1991. He shared some photos of his new demo facility on our Facebook page. I did not look at that. Did I? I don't think so. He's getting. Oh, I did look at this. He's getting into custom-made DIY speakers with customizable crossovers, and shared some photos of prototypes he's made. I did see that, and those were
Hmm.
very cool. Those were dipole speakers as well. It looked like it
Well, yeah,
didn't
because
look like
they're
back.
open baffle design, so they're using traditional cone type drivers, but there's nothing behind them. They're sitting inside of a baffle, so it's firing out the front, but it's also firing out the back. So yeah, those are open baffle design. Now,
And
I was a
lastly,
little bit surprised because when he says he's talking about customizable crossovers, these days I'm usually thinking digital. I'm thinking
right?
using a mini DSP or something similar to that and using digital crossovers because I really think that's the future way to go. It makes a heck of a lot of sense to me to have that kind of granular, very precise control. But it looked in these pictures anyway that he had like, your electrical breadboards and he's sticking traditional capacitors, inductors, resistors in there and creating crossovers that way, which of course is completely legitimate. That's the majority of speakers out there are still using those components to make their crossovers. But I was a little bit surprised that that was the route he was taking as opposed to digital crossovers. But hey, he's getting into it, so maybe he'll do that too. There's no reason he can't.
Yeah. So lastly, he wants to know why we don't have an installation specialist on our podcast as a regular guest or co-host. He says he would volunteer. Yeah. Well, think I addressed that one already, but that's not really why. The why is that because we don't. I mean, it's not like I haven't had custom installers on here, and why you know it just hasn't worked out. I mean, Rob came on the podcast because he came on the podcast a couple of times, and then it just sort of worked out. Liz came on the podcast. Dina started the podcast, and this is just sort of this whole thing started because Clint said, "Hey Tom, you should do a podcast. You're opinionated." I'm like, all right then, and that's it's just sort of the way it worked out. Now, I'm not
So
saying that James is not good podcast material. Maybe we'll have him on someday. I wouldn't mind hearing from more people.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I'm all for interviews and guests. I mean, we said last year we wanted to do more of them, and I would still like to. It's just a matter of, right now our schedules are so hectic and we don't know what's happening from week to week
Yeah,
that we can't, unfortunately, I mean, we would really like to plan it out more and do more with the podcast than we're able to right now. But, this stuff will eventually come to pass and we'll get back on and, start doing some of the things with the podcast that we would like to do if we were able. So, I've certainly have no problem with having guests on. And one of the things as far as being a podcaster is that having the knowledge, but then talking on the mic, as even opposed to talking to customers or talking to friends about it. Sometimes talking on the mic is a different skill set versus all that. So I mean, as to why don't we have one? Because we'd have to audition people. That's
yeah.
why, and we just don't have the time to do it right now.
We did audition.
That's all it comes
At
down to.
least I auditioned one girl for this podcast too
Hmm.
recently, not too long, I guess a couple months ago, and I thought it went pretty good, but she backed out. So,
Yeah.
we could have had another person there. We have had installers on here. I mean, we were just talking about George Tucker. He's an installer.
Hmm.
And I've had installers in the past on the podcast as well. So we're not against it.
Yeah.
At
So it's
least
just
I'm not against it.
I, I
It's just a matter of time and energy. Like I'm supposed
yeah.
to be on that AV Week podcast. I was supposed to be on this week, but I never got around to emailing back for the exact same reasons as everything else. Just too
Yeah.
busy.
And I just wanted to mention James has put quite a few messages over on our G Plus page. Like the only person putting messages there.
I
So
think I responded to him at least once.
yeah, oh yeah, I think so. So I just wanted to give a shout out because it's really nice that he's enjoying our show that much and
Yeah.
wants to get involved. And so it's not like we're opposed to maybe one day having him on as a guest or something like that. But it's like it's
James,
just the situation
get a
right
set
now.
of headphones and make sure you have a mic that's
Yeah.
not connected directly to your computer, meaning it's not the mic in your computer, and we'll talk. Jason, is this not? Did you
Yep.
just talk to Jason? No, that was James. Jason wrote to us a few weeks back about his older Yamaha M80 amplifier that did not have 12-volt trigger inputs. He bought the Panamax surge protector that offers trigger-controlled outlets, and it's working perfectly. Yeah.
Yay.
He's using Infinity Alpha speakers, and he's thinking about adding some height channels. He wants speakers that are small, easy to mount, and not too expensive. So he's wondering if the NHT Super Zeros would be a good match and get the job done. My understanding, from people who've done it in the past, is that those height speakers tend to be a lot more forgiving of timbre matching.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's
I think
just that even if they were identical speakers, they're still not going to timbre match because they're way up there. So
yeah,
yeah.
it seems like you can kind of throw anything up there you want to at this point. We have yet to have found some valid reason why you need to have matching speakers. So yes, I think the Super Zeros will be great. They're sealed, they're small. You can mount them with probably a freaking hook. Yeah, I'm like you could just hang them like a picture. So yes, I think they would be good.
Yeah, and they're quite a neutral speaker. They're
Yes, they
quite a
are.
linear speaker. So when you use your auto EQ system, and I highly recommend, I mean, for people who shy away from, don't like auto EQ systems or whatever it is, I highly recommend them for front speakers that you use that system because it does make a difference in getting them to actually wrestling them into
The height
timbre matching
speakers.
your other speakers, the height speakers. Yeah,
Yeah.
because like I say, even if you put identical speakers up there, they just don't sound the same because of where they're positioned. So since the Super Zeros are nice neutral linear speakers, they will respond well to being equalized. So I think they're a very good choice. Also, the Infinity Alphas, I mean, they're a Harman Group company. Infinity's a Harman Group company, and Infinity speakers tended to be quite neutral, quite linear to begin with. So I think that's a good choice. Yeah.
Yeah. He's also got a Panasonic ZT65. Is that 65-inch plasma?
No, that was the
Yeah.
series. It was
Okay.
ZT65.
ZT65 plasma that claims it can display 98% of the DCI P3 color gamut. This is a Rob question if I ever.
That's yeah, that's the color gamut that you are actually seeing in the movie theater right now. You go to any movie theater, that is the color gamut they are using. It is a wider color gamut than the Rec 709 color gamut that we're using for HD TV and Blu-ray. So it actually literally displays more colors.
Okay. When Ultra HD content comes along, will he be able to take advantage of the wider color gamut using his current plasma? And what about things like HDR, which is that high dynamic range, and Dolby Vision? How will all these things work if you connect an uh, an Ultra HD player to an existing display?
Ah,
That's a good question, and I don't know the
it
answer to it.
is.
But if I were to pants it, meaning just answer up by the seat of my pants, I would say no, and that's because it doesn't have whatever decoders that are necessary for the wider color gamut. But Rob's going to tell us what it is right
Yeah, so I mean, the real answer is we don't know for 100% sure because Ultra HD players are not actually something we can buy and test yet. We do know that the Blu-ray Disc Association has said they are going to use HDCP 2.2 copy protection. That's a fact. They're going to use that. Now, obviously, your existing plasma and you know what? I hate to break it to you, but probably even the 4K TV that some people might have just purchased almost none of them have HDCP 2.2 copy protection, and that is a hardware thing. If you bought one of the Samsungs where all of the inputs are actually on like a separate little box that you can replace, that was their solution. They're like, hey, we're going to release a 4K TV now. The HDCP 2.2 chips don't even exist yet, but we'll have a panel on the back that you can remove and replace with a new one for like $300 or whatever it is, and you can upgrade the hardware in the future. That was their way of doing it. But a lot of TVs, and of course all HD TVs, regular 1080p TVs, they don't have that copy protection. So, what's going to happen when you connect an Ultra HD Blu-ray player to a regular TV that does not have HDCP 2.2? I don't know. Now, I'm assuming what they're going to do is have the players be smart enough to say, I don't detect HDCP 2.2, therefore I will output 1080p. I won't output 4K because that requires the copy protection, but I'll output 1080p. I would hope that that's the decision they'll come to. It's the only thing that makes sense in my mind, but don't know for sure. But all this other stuff, the color, the high dynamic range, the Dolby Vision, all that stuff, the way that, and now this is my understanding of it, again, it might not be the actual happens in the end, but my understanding is a lot of that is being encoded essentially as an extension. So you have some sort of baseline video, and then all the additional information is like an extension that you will see if you have the correct decoder built into your display. If you don't, then you won't see it. So that's, I mean, particularly Dolby Vision, that's for sure how Dolby Vision works. It starts with a regular dynamic range and a regular color gamut, and then it adds an extension on top of that. This is very similar to like how DTS audio works, you know, so DTS HD master audio, if you play it back on a regular DTS decoder, you still get sound. You still get regular DTS sound. If you play it back on a DTS HD master audio decoder, you get the higher fidelity sound quality. So same thing with Dolby Vision and high dynamic range. The color, that's one of those things where I am certain you're going to need the copy protection for that color to actually be output from the player to begin with. So even though your display, your ZT65 Plasma might be capable of displaying a wider color gamut, it is not going to be capable of receiving the signal from the player. The signal that's going to come out of the player is still going to be regular, I'm assuming regular Rec 709, because you don't have the HDCP 2.2 copy protection. If it's going to display more colors, it's guessing at it. It's using some sort
Like
of
it has been doing
internal
with everything else that
upscaling. That's
you've
right.
put into it. So,
Yeah.
lastly, he added some Philips Hue lighting. That's that backlighting that supposed to reduce eye strain and can
No,
change colors.
The
Is it
Philips
change
Hue are
colors with
actual.
stuff?
Yeah, the Philips Hue are actual, so quote unquote smart light bulbs. So they screw into any regular outlet, and then you can connect them to your cell phone. Basically, you use an app on your cell phone to control your lights. So they are part of home integration and smart lighting and things like that. They can integrate with
It's
Insteon
not
and
that
other
backlighting
programs
crap.
like that.
The what is that? What was that
No,
called?
that was Ambilight.
Ambilight.
Was
That's what I
Philips
was thinking of.
Ambilight.
All right.
Yeah,
So
but
whatever.
Hue
Control
is its own
lights with this Harmony remote even more than he anticipated. He liked our thoughts on some of the TV shows that have advertised being able to have the Philips Hue lights sync up with the show while you're watching it, so that the colors change depending on the scene.
Yes, that is horrible.
I
That is a
can't
horrible
imagine
thing to
why I
do.
would want my TV to control my lights. I can't imagine any situation where I think that would be a good idea. First of all, how does the show even know where my lights are in the room?
Well, it's all an app, right? So you get
I
an
know it's
app that syncs to the TV show, and
yeah.
then while you're watching the show, you have the app on, and then the app controls the lights. So it's things like, somebody gets stabbed and all your lights turn red, right? It's,
Can they
like
turn
literally.
red? They can change colors?
Oh yeah, yeah. The Philips Hue lights can totally change colors. Yeah.
Oh, that's just irritating.
Yeah.
Though I imagine for a horror movie it'd be pretty good. I guess 12
Uh,
Monkeys, the new 12 Monkeys one was kind of the way it should, whatever.
yeah.
I don't know. As long as it wouldn't make it brighter or, it's like, I don't know.
I'm so against this because I mean I like video fidelity. I would go to the extent of if I'm building a room to watch video, I'm going to paint the walls a neutral gray or even a black. I'm going to calibrate my display. The last thing I want is my lights changing color and biasing my eye towards a certain color so that now everybody's, the skin turns
And
green because the lights
that
got
doesn't.
red.
It's just like anything else. I mean, there's people out there that like those chairs that move, the D box ones. Is that what
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
called? I've never
yeah.
been to one of those theaters. I have sat in one of those chairs before at a custom install
Too
place.
noisy.
Oh,
Too noisy.
that's really where you started with that. I mean, the
Uh-huh.
fact that it's completely lame and distracting, and I can't watch a movie if my chair is trying to shake me out of it. Like, oh, you're flying through the air like Spider-Man. No, I'm not. I'm sitting in the chair in the middle of a theater, and will you just settle down and let me watch this thing? Like, what if I had a drink? Huh? What if I had popcorn? Do I want popcorn all over the place? No, I don't. So stop it. So,
Yeah.
anyways. Monty already owns a Harmony One remote, but he saw a promo at Best Buy offering $100 off the new Harmony Ultimate for trading in an older Harmony remote. He's wondering if the Harmony Ultimate is that much better and worth taking advantage of this offer. Uh, do you have anything that's Bluetooth that you have to control?
Mm.
Because unless I'm wrong, I don't think the Harmony remote did Bluetooth, right?
Oh, the Harmony One certainly from the old days. I mean, the Harmony One was infrared only.
Yes, so
They
I'm saying.
also had the Harmony 900, which looked the same but could send radio frequency controls to a little base station. But all that little base station did was take the radio frequency controls and turn them into IR. So both of them, neither of them did Bluetooth, neither of them did Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So yeah, I love my Ultimate. There
Yeah.
are a couple of issues with it.
Mm.
The little touch screen I think is not as responsive as I like it to be, and sometimes it's too responsive, meaning I sat on it and something happened. The
Hmm.
fun is that you take it out of the room, and when the movie gets too loud and the kids are in there watching, you turn it down and you hear them all yell, "Who's sitting on the remote?" I'm like, I am, and because I have control, I love it. My mom even loves it. She's like, she wants to upgrade to it because she loves the fact that you don't have to point it at anything. That it's very, the remote itself is physically small. It's very
Hmm.
ergonomic in your hand. She likes the little touch screen. It's she likes it. So, are you having a problem with your Harmony One? Is everything working well for you? But I mean, I use my parents' whatever is it, the 660 or something like that. I've used that
650
one.
probably, yeah.
Yeah, 650, and I've used it and it's fine. But having to press and hold it in a certain way and stuff like that, while certainly not a deal breaker in the whole idea of a remote, since we're so used to that. Once you get used to just holding the remote and doing stuff without having to worry about the orientation, you're like so put out. I'm like, I have to point this at something. What are we in the Middle Ages over here?
Not to
So,
mention, once you have the hub, if even if you misplace the remote or someone else has it, you can pull out your phone and control things that way through the
yeah,
app. So I am all for the hub-based solution. If you're just saying, there's nothing wrong with my Harmony One remote, but I'm kind of in the mood for a new remote. I absolutely think the hub systems are cool. You can do stuff with them that you can't do with IR only. You're not wasting your money by getting a Harmony Ultimate. Now, as for this specific deal, which is probably not even going on anymore because we're so late to
right.
finally addressing this, but I wouldn't really go on a deal that says you have to trade in your old one just to get $100 off because the Harmony Ultimates go on sale $50 off, even $100 off. They go on sale frequently,
Yeah,
if you just look around at various retailers. So I wouldn't go with a deal that requires you to trade in your old remote to recycle it because I'm like you can still use that Harmony One in another room or give it to a friend or a relative or something like that.
sure. That's a better
You know
recycling solution for me.
exactly, yeah.
In
So
fact,
I just
I
wait for a sale if
think.
that's what you
You
want.
remember a long time ago, I said, "Hey, I got a bunch of crap I want to get rid of," and one of the things I said was a receiver. Well, Monty got the receiver because he asked for it.
Ah, there you
So I
go.
sent it to him. He just got it, and I think he asked me. I think he sent me an email today saying, "I got it. Yay! How much do I owe you for shipping?" I'm not gonna charge you for shipping, dude. Why would I do that? I, I just take it. Leave it. It's yours. Enjoy. Jeez.
Well, nice of him to offer. Geez, you don't have to get mad at a person for being
I
kind.
know, but I told him I was going to take it in the first place. Anyways, all right. So, lastly, Monty also watches the San Jose Sharks NHL broadcast, and he's seen them advertising butt kicker base shakers on a specific website, which is shakemycouch.com.
Yup.
He's wondering what we think of it. Oh, God, I hate these things so much. Oh, God, I hate them. I hate them so much. It's so bad. It's like I don't have enough money for a real subwoofer, so I'm gonna get something that shakes my couch just like a subwoofer was. No, stop it! You're embarrassing yourself. Yeah, just get a real subwoofer, and if that shakes the couch, well, then it will feel organic because not only will your couch be shaking, but you will be shaking along with the couch. Therefore, it doesn't feel like the couch is shaking as much as everything in the room is shaking, which feels normal. When your couch starts shaking, you know it's your couch. Your butt's not that fooled by the fact. I mean, it's not like you can tell that it's not just. I mean, you can tell that it's just a couch. You can tell that. And to me, I find it completely distracting. I always have. Never liked it. Some people love them. Try if you got the money, maybe you sold that receiver I just gave you, and now you got money to burn, and you want to burn it on that. Fine, try it out. Tell us what you think about it. I've tried it, and I loathe them.
So I don't hate butt kickers as much as Tom does. I don't think they're a necessity at all. They become a gimmick. They become a gimmick real quick. So it like the hue lighting changing colors along with your TV show. It's something you might use once or twice, and then that's going to be the end of it. So yeah, I'm not a fan. But I looked a little bit more into specifically this thing that the San Jose Sharks are doing, because what they did is they put some, I mean, basically microphones it's only in the center ice portion, so it's not in the corners and it's not behind the nets, so it's only in the center ice portion on the glass. So in other words, it's only going to happen when somebody gets like body checked into the boards in center ice. I mean,
How often
the
does that
benches.
happen? Isn't it usually the corners where those guys get slammed?
Exactly. It's usually down on either end, not in the
Right.
middle. And then, of course, you have the benches in the middle and the other side, so it's really only one side of the ice. So the number of times this thing is even going to activate in any given game, I think, is going to be pretty low. And then all they did was mix it into the LFE channel because they're just sending it out as a regular signal and that's how your butt kickers connect to your system is they just connect to the subwoofer output of your system. So essentially all they did was put a microphone on the glass at center ice, so if someone happens to get body checked there, it will activate your bass shaker. So this is really nothing different than just having a subwoofer.
Yeah, I
It's
guarantee you
yeah,
that whatever
it's
that
a
is will also
gimmick.
activate my dual SVS subs,
Mm-hmm.
and it will shake my couch. And I didn't have to buy
Mm-hmm.
a butt kicker. I did have to buy two SVS subs. I didn't have to. I got to because I was going to do it anyways. Thomas is trying to balance a practical approach to improving his video audio and planning for the future. He owns his apartment. He owns his apartment, but it must be in New York or something like that. That's the only people that say that. But plans to buy a house in 3 to 5 years. His neighbor upstairs can hear his subwoofer if he uses it, and he isn't sure how to maximize the value of his purchases. He currently has a 5.1 Pioneer Andrew Jones bookshelf speaker combo and the 7.1 Sony AVR receiver. Excuse me. He's looking to upgrade from a 55-inch Vizio bought in '09 to a front projector. Should he get a BenQ HT 1075, or would spending more on the Sony VPL HW40ES be worth it considering his future plans for a house? Rob?
Aha. So my opinion on this is, first of all, he said he plans to buy a house in 3 to 5 years. That means it's not happening like next year. These plans aren't in progress. He isn't currently looking at houses, which means things can change. They can definitely
Dramatically.
change. Not only that, in 3 to 5 years, we are going to have new projectors. That is undoubtedly true. They might be laser driven, they might be nice and inexpensive, they definitely might be 4K, all sorts of things. So not only that, he sent in some pictures of his room, which is great. So we got to see what he's working with. White walls, windows that he can cover, but not totally light control. There is no way he is going to be getting the full benefit right now, as he's watching it, of upgrading to the HW40 over the BenQ. So here's a situation where I'd say, I'm all for getting a projector because going from a 55-inch Vizio to a projector, that is a huge difference that you will
Yeah.
definitely enjoy for the next few years. But save your money. The BenQ 1075 is a very good looking projector. It's nice and bright, so it will contend well with your current viewing environment. And in 3 to 5 years, what you're going to be able to get for $2,000 is going to be something different and better than the HW40. So I say don't go for the upgrade right now, which is a little bit unlike me most of the time, but here's a situation. I think the 1075 is absolutely the way to go here.
I think Thomas is going to be very disappointed at the end of this podcast. That was kind of my sense too. 3 to 5 years is a long way out. Let's put it this way: by that time, the question you're going to be asking yourself, even if you haven't made this move, is, am I going to upgrade my projector or buy a new bulb?
Yeah.
So you're already going to be in thinking about buying something else anyways. 3 to 5 years is a long way, dude. So I don't know that I would go with the cheaper one for right now. Second, should he buy the Andrew Jones tower speakers to upgrade his front, left, and right? No, that's my sense. His room is fairly small. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
say anything about the fact that he thought that the he was lacking in audio quality. I didn't really think that his room, from what I remember seeing, would support very well tower speakers. It looked more like he was working around a fireplace and
Mm-hmm.
bookshelves and stuff like that. So my sense is no. I mean, you could. There's nothing wrong with it. It'd be a fairly
Oh yeah.
inexpensive upgrade. But
Yeah.
if you're not going, oh, my speakers sound strained, and they sometimes make this weird clanging noise, and the one time I saw smoke, I would not really worry about upgrading right now because 3 to 5 years is a long time. And in 3 to 5 years, you could be doing, haven't upgraded in not 3 to 5 years. I haven't upgraded in 5 to 8 years or 8 to 10 years. I'm getting a whole new theater, honey,
Mm-hmm.
with this house. Rather than you just bought those speakers 3 years ago. Why do we have to upgrade them?
Yeah, in terms of what you could spend your money on today that will make the biggest difference to what you're seeing and hearing, I wouldn't say the towers are like that's where you need to go spend your money right now.
Yeah,
You're not going to get a largely different experience than what you already have just by using the bookshelf. I like those BS22 bookshelf speakers. They sound really good. So yeah, I mean, like Tom says, it's not like those are expensive speakers. If you get them, it's not like you're going to go, oh, I totally wasted my money on these things. But as far as maximizing every dollar, that wouldn't be where I would spend it
no.
right now.
And lastly, I think, nope, second to lastly, I don't know, maybe lastly.
Okay.
What can he do about his subwoofers? He's concerned that the downfiring design of the Pioneer subwoofer is partly to blame since he has a crawl space under his apartment, so he figures that might be acting as a drum. But could something counterintuitive like adding a second Pioneer subwoofer actually help? Man, this guy's got money to burn. Would a different subwoofer be better? Can I buy an SVS, please? Basically, he wants good sound and video now, great sound and video in the future, and to maximize every dollar spent. What should we do? I know what Rob's going to say. He's going to say, do you have one of those Oralex grandma pads underneath there? Because
Any type of decoupling device.
yes, it sounds like what's happening here. Now, first of all, again, bass frequencies are omnidirectional. They wrap all the way around the speaker. Does make any difference if the driver is down firing, up firing, side firing, or some combination thereof. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
not the reason why
that's
your
not the
neighbor upstairs
problem.
can hear it. No.
That's right. If that was really the problem, you should be able to turn your subwoofer over, and your neighbor will go, "Hey, I don't hear anything." No.
Right.
So you need to decouple. So you want to get one of those Oralex grandma pads or some sort of decoupling foot thing, and you could just try this. And if your neighbor's willing to help you
Mm-hmm.
experiment, you say, "Hey, I'm going to go turn it up really loud, and can you tell me if you can hear it?" Then I'm going to do something. Tell me if it gets any softer for you. And that something is put on the pillow or put it on a something, big pile of blankets,
Big folded up blanket. Yep.
and
Yep.
see if that makes a difference for him. If it does, then go buy the pad, and that will help you and him in the future.
Yep.
But for right now, it seems to me that what you should be doing is buying a projector
Mm-hmm.
and saving your money. Because nothing that you're asking us makes me think that you need these things at this moment. And
Yeah.
this is why we don't have any sponsors on this show right here.
But no, I mean this. I'm glad we're able to give this advice because this is the truth. I mean, it's honest. It's honest feedback. I
SVS is
mean,
like,
the
oh,
other
why
thing
are you
is,
suggesting SVS right now? I'm like,
the other thing is, all the money he's saving today is money he's going to be able to spend when he gets his house,
yeah,
and he's going to be able to get something fantastic then because he saved money today. So yeah, we're just delaying. We're delaying the
delay.
purchase.
This is a
We'll get to
delaying
sponsors
tactic.
later.
Yes,
But
I don't see a lot for you to spend money on right now.
yeah, I wouldn't say go get a second of those 8-inch Pioneer subwoofers because as much as I really like the Andrew Jones speakers and think they're a fantastic value, I'm not a huge fan of the subwoofers. I mean, it's not that they're bad, it's just there's plenty of sound they are literally not producing, and I just don't think they're that fantastic. So I wouldn't spend money on getting a second one, and it will not solve your issue just by having a second one of your upstairs neighbor being bothered. They're being bothered because some way, somehow, vibrations are making it from your room to his room. That might be physical vibrations carried by the structure of your building, in which case decoupling the subwoofer from the floor will help a lot. Or it might just be that sound is just making it through. It's going through vents, which is, flanking noise. It's going through the airways. It's going through your windows. It might just be going straight up through the floor because there's no soundproofing or whatever in the way it was constructed. All of those things are possible. But if it's structural before and vibration, then decoupling it will help. If that works, if you experiment, you take your subwoofer, turn it upside down, put it on top of a bunch of blankets. Boom, decoupled. If that works and your neighbor isn't bothered anymore, then you could get a pair, because we always recommend a pair, of really good subwoofers. That is somewhere you could spend your money, and you will definitely be able to use them in the future. The problem is you don't know what that future room is yet, so chances are I would probably err on the side of buying quote unquote more subwoofer than I need in terms of it could fill a larger room than what you have right now, but that might end up being a waste of money. You don't really know.
Yeah,
So
I'm gonna have
it's
to
a bit tough.
disagree with you, Rob. I mean, you could.
Yep.
I agree in what you're saying in principle, but my experience has been
Yes.
you're going to end up with subwoofers that are either too small or too, God help you, too big. And you'll be sitting there with these massive subwoofers that you literally wanted to be buried with. And now you have to get rid of them because your stupid room is too small. And
Hmm.
just think about this. You're going to be house shopping, and you might walk into a house that you absolutely love and go, "Oh, where am I going to put the subwoofers? There's no place to put the subwoofers in here." And your wife is going to punch you in some place where it really hurts, and that's not some place that I want you to be, sir. So what I would like you to
Yeah.
do is just save your money and get your Excel spreadsheet out with all the speakers you want to listen to, all the subwoofers you've heard, and which ones you want the most, and just start shopping so that when it comes time and you've got that house, you're like, honey, I need 10 grand, and we are gonna outfit this place. I got the paint, I got the I got the screen, we've already got the projector. We're gonna upgrade that in a couple of years. We've got new speakers, dual subwoofers, blah blah blah. She's gonna go, what? I'm gonna go. Tom said it's okay, and I haven't been spending money for 5 years. If you got any problems, go see him, and I'm gonna not answer my email.
Yeah, his
Wow.
as far as having really good sound quality now, the best that he can obtain right now, it would be really nice if you could have those lower frequencies filled in. I mean, if there's a way to do that without bothering your neighbor, then that would be really nice. The Pioneer subwoofer you have right now is doing an okay job. If you upgraded your subwoofer, I certainly wouldn't be angry at you because that is a
It's a
worthwhile upgrade.
valid thing to do.
Yeah,
It's just you just have to
but
be
it's
prepared that
we're
it's
we're just hedging it a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, it's that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, you could upgrade all your speakers, but then where would you be 3 to 5 years from now? I mean, you could get an entirely new surround sound system and go, "Oh my God, it sounds
Right.
amazing," and then you get into your new room and go, "Oh my God, it sounds weird." Because believe me, it happens all the time. Michael, update us on playing his downloaded content from his new NAS, network accessible storage. Is that right?
You can get a network attached storage is
Whatever.
usually
Instead of from his Mac, he says it's working very well. No more hiccups during playback, but the NAS wasn't as accessible during setup as he would have liked. Michael is visually impaired, so he had to get his wife to do the initial setup of the NAS, but it's all working well now. Man, that must have been infuriating for at least 50% of that couple, if not 100%, because believe me, trying to tell my wife how to operate a remote control is literally the most frustrating thing I can do, and that includes anything involving my children. He has a question about the settings for his speaker channel levels. He says that each time he has to run Odyssey, it always sets his speaker levels fairly low, negative numbers on the minus 12 dB to plus 12 dB scale. He says he prefers to turn up the master volume dial only 30 to 40%, but then it's too quiet, and he feels he needs to manually increase the speaker channel levels. Is there a solution? Why are you stuck on this 30 to 40% master volume dial thing? That's my question.
yes.
I don't really
Yeah.
understand that. Why is
Well,
that?
I mean, I have a sneaking suspicion it's just one of the, like how you get some of the older, not quite so great subwoofers, and if you turned up their volume dial any more than about halfway, they started to maybe kind of hum or make
Yeah.
some noise or
Yeah.
something like that. I think that's maybe just sort of a carryover from an experience like that, where he's like, I just never want to turn my volume dial up more than halfway, type of thing. It's not a percentage. It's not a percentage. It's not saying you're using this much of the capability of your receiver, and by only turning it up halfway, you've got 50% more headroom left above that. Like that. It isn't how that works. Your volume dial is just a gain knob. It's a potentiometer. That's all it's doing. So yeah, what the solution here is to change how you're thinking about your volume knob, because
Yeah.
it's not 30 to 40%, it's I need to turn this up as loud as I need it to be. And the other part of it is, if you turned it up until your volume readout read 0 dB on your relative scale, then that would mean you're listening at full reference volume. And what Odyssey is trying to do is say, when you turn up your master volume so that the front readout says 0 dB on the relative scale, you are hearing reference volume. And in order for that to happen, I have to turn down each of your speakers some amount, because otherwise they'll be too loud
At reference volume,
at
and
reference
that just
volume.
means that based on where you've placed them and your
Mm-hmm.
room and which speakers you have and how efficient they are. Do we know what
Mm-hmm.
speakers he has? Does he have the Pioneer like everybody else apparently?
No, he had some Fluence. I know he has a Fluence
Oh, okay.
center,
Yeah.
and what was it? PSB front towers.
Okay. So for whatever reason, those speakers in that placement need to be turned down in order for at zero at reference volume, they are
Mm-hmm.
getting the proper they're putting out 75
Yeah.
dB at your.
And that's a good thing. It means you have more than enough power to hit full reference volume at your listening distance.
That's right.
You
So
have
that
no
means that
worries.
this whole 30 to 40% thing, you got to get away from that, dude. That question kind of blew me away. I'm like, what is it? Does the knob not go higher than that? Because I mean, you should get a
Obviously, it goes
different
higher.
knob. You need to get a different knob if that's the problem. Just turn it up. Because
Yeah.
if
What?
by changing the speaker, all you're doing is turning it up at the channel level portion rather than where
Right.
you should be adjusting, which is at the master volume, which is screwing up if you have something like dynamic EQ, is messing all that up.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, you just don't overthink this. If it's not loud enough, turn it up. If it's
Yeah.
not loud enough and you don't want to turn it up, then you just have to sit closer. Those are the options.
Yeah. No. Where I would have some concern is you turned your master volume dial all the way up until the front readout says 0 dB on the relative scale, and it's still way too quiet.
Oh
Right?
yeah, then you
If
got a
that
problem.
if that were the case, then I go, ooh, something's a little bit off here. But no, 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 no. You just get it out of your mind that there's a percentage that you're using of the it doesn't work
So
that
the
way when
real
there's a
question was, is there a solution? And the solution is turn the volume up.
yeah. Leave the Odyssey settings, because I've rarely run Odyssey and had it set the channel levels way incorrectly. It does that really well. So
Yeah.
leave that alone, and if it's too quiet, turn up your master volume. There's your solution.
I swear today is like common sense day. I think it really is. It's like, oh,
No,
the
I mean I get it.
Nick
There's just
told me
some
to put
people
them
have this.
someplace different than where I experimented them, and they sounded really good. What should I do? I would die. I'm really kind of at the loss for here. All right. So that was Michael. Michael, don't
Yes.
worry, dude. You're just overthinking it. Gary experiment. This is Infinite Gary experiment with moving his seat since he can't move his Infinite Babel subwoofer.
Yeah.
And he did. You could try. And
That
he
thing's
did
stuck where it
find
is.
that moving just 8 inches closer to his screen made an audible difference. So he is sitting in a weird place, and there is some sort of bass mode going on there. However, he had the seating distance to the screen so carefully planned that he found the larger viewing angle a bit unpleasant when sitting closer. Aha!
Mhm.
That's what happens when you have a well-designed theater. He also, except for the whole basement, he's also talking to several people in the industry about their opinions on acoustic treatments. He's wondering how there can be so much variation. For example, he spoke with one well-known person in the audio industry who has done an about face and now recommends minimal treatments and diffusion over absorption if any treatments are used. The same person claims that absorption negatively impacts transient response. So what's the deal?
That person heard one room where that was true and for some reason applied it to every room.
We just
That's
see
what
this so
happened.
often. We see this so often where you're like, "Hey, in my room, this is how this sounds really good. Therefore, it works in all rooms." Really? Because your room's a triangle, and I don't see how your room is indicative of all the other rooms. Or that room had one wall that was full of glass, or that room had carpet on the walls, therefore diffusion was really important, or that room had a drop ceiling with 4-inch thick acoustic tiles on the ceiling, and therefore the diffusion really helped.
There are also people, I've seen this firsthand, who have built up gradually. Like they started with a small amount of acoustic treatments, and then they thought, ooh, that made an improvement, so more must be better, right? And by the end of it, they had like a padded cell, and
Yeah,
that's what they were in. And then they took out all of the absorption, and they went, oh my God, it sounds better without it. Like it's that type of
yeah,
progression that happens, right?
yeah.
Because they ended up going too far and then they swing back the other direction and suddenly proclaim that, absorption is bad. It's like, no, there is a correct amount and a correct proportion and a correct placement. All of it in the pursuit of having even decay times across all frequencies. So, can you overabsorb? Yes, you can, because then you can have high frequencies that have no decay time at all and base frequencies that still do, and then it's uneven, and that isn't the goal. It's even decay times. So exactly like what Chris Kyriakakis from Odyssey said, there is essentially one correct amount of room treatment, which is when all the decay times become
And
even,
I have
and
a
you can go above or below that.
I have a real problem with somebody who says that absorption negatively impacts stuff and that therefore diffusion is better. I mean, I just want to think about this for a second, all right? If the idea is that your speakers are trying to create an image, let's just go two channel here, trying to create an image that somehow floats, tricks your brain to think that it floats between the two speakers. Would you think, just intuitively, would you think that having some of that sound be bounced around the room randomly at the same time as it's coming toward, as the direct sound is coming towards you, do you think that would make things better or worse? Well,
Well,
it's just sort of this sort of background sort of noise that in many ways is better than having direct reflections, but it's
mm-hmm.
still not as clear as
but
you
what it's
having that direct sound at you.
but what the diffusion is doing is allowing you to have a slightly longer decay time in the higher frequencies,
Right.
which might be needed if there's no way for you to reduce the decay times of the lower frequencies. Sometimes there's only so much bass trapping you can put into a room. And then you go, okay, that is the decay time that I can achieve from my bass frequencies. Now, if I want my higher frequencies to have a similar decay time, I'm going to need diffusion rather than absorption because otherwise I won't have even decay times. So that it's dependent. It depends on the room and the setup and it's unique and you can't just make blanket statements. There is a
Yes. And that's
correct
the thing about
proportion.
right now, room acoustics is probably the least well-known thing in
Mm-hmm.
audio. I think I don't even have to say probably. I don't have to hedge on that. It is really the least understood thing. We are still figuring out more stuff about it because it's not just trying to figure out where to put stuff like for every single room, but it even goes into understanding how we hear and what sounds
Mm-hmm.
right for us, and we still haven't completely figured that out.
And
So
a
you're
lot of
gonna,
the research is still subjective. It's still going on what did the majority of the people in this study prefer? So I mean, that to me raises all sorts of issues because then it's saying, well, they're going to prefer what they were used to, right? Most people tend to do that. They prefer what they're already used to. So
you can
even if there's
overcome that
something,
by having them go through enough tests so that they
yeah,
become
yeah,
used to other things.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just the least well understood thing within audio. And for right now, you're going to see a lot of people having this sort of discussion and then doing about faces. The subwoofer thing has really only in the last couple of years has really kind of gotten somebody sort of went and figured it out and blew everybody's minds because of it. Now that's only one really figured it out for like rectangular rooms. They haven't been able to figure out for all types of rooms, but it's still good enough right now that we're in a much better place than we were 5 years ago. hopefully soon we'll figure out this room acoustic thing a little bit better so that we can get a better idea of where we should be putting things, how much diffusion, how much absorption, whether or not there's a perfect, well, I really want to, like the GIC acoustic stuff where it does absorption at the low frequencies and diffusion at the higher frequencies.
Hmm.
I really think that in the future is where we're going to end up with. We're going to end up with some sort of panel. It's going to be like it's not quite, I won't call it tuned, but what it does is it absorbs bass and absorbs some high frequency while making some other things diffuse, so that you're getting those decay times, a little bit more even, sort of within the panel itself. I'm not sure if we're anywhere near that, but we'll see. So. Joe. I visited Joe. I visited Joe in person way back in August. Joe is still working away in his theater. His house was under construction when I was there. He was all set to buy a Denon AVR X4000 from Accessories for Less, but then you saw that they were selling the AVR 4520 Ci for not even $200 more. Aside from the small increase in price, is there any downside at all to the 4520 versus the X4000? I think I got this question like right in the midst of all the family drama that was going on. I think I shut off a quick response based
I
on my
did too.
recollection of what was the 4520. Like, I looked at both those receivers and I went with the X4000 because it was a heck of a lot cheaper than the 4520. But the 4520 basically was X4000 with two more channels of amplification and I
The
think
ability to go to 11 speakers instead of 9.
don't they have the 11 channel inputs or 7 channel inputs or whatever it is?
Oh, the
Uh,
analog inputs, yeah.
Analog inputs too was the other thing. And I was like, for me, that wasn't a deal breaker in any way, shape, or form. So I was like, no, I'll go with the
Well,
X4000. But if it's going to be just a marginal amount more, I was like, yeah, man, jump on that.
and
So
if you have some use for those extra two, because like the 4520 has 9 amps inside of it, the X4000 has 7. So
yeah.
he was talking about maybe using those extra 2 amps to drive a second zone or something like that. Yeah, if you got a use for them, and it's going to be
Well,
more expensive for you to add some other amplifier to do that, then why
if
not?
I
There's no
remember
downside.
correctly, he could theoretically have 3 zones because he's got like his
Hmm.
main theater, which he's only going to put 5.2 in or
Hmm.
1. I don't know if he's going to go with 2. He had like in-house audio and he had some speakers that were outside, so he could technically have 3 zones. And
Hmm.
with the 5520, he could use that. So this is one of those
Yeah.
cases where it could definitely come in handy for him.
Yeah, I think he would just want to know like the X4000 is newer, so is it doing something that the 4520 can't
It
do?
has all the same Odyssey stuff, so.
Unrelated to Joe, there was somebody else on a forum who was asking about a 4520 question, so I ended up reading through the manual of the 4520. I found one thing which is very inconsequential, but when you're doing the Odyssey setup, the X4000 does the nice thing where if you're using the two subwoofers, because both of them do have the sub EQ HT part of the Odyssey setup, so they can independently do two subwoofers. The X4000 does the nice thing is it first asks you put the microphone in your listening position, then adjust your subwoofer number 1 until it reads 75 dB on the screen, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
adjust subwoofer number 2 until it reads 75 dB on the screen. So that means actually moving the volume dial on the subwoofers themselves so that they're level matched before you begin. The X4000 does that, the 4520 doesn't. You'd have to do it manually on the 4520. It doesn't
Oh,
put the read on the screen. Oh my god.
oh,
That
how
is
will you survive?
that is one downside to the 4520. It is slightly less convenient for the original part of setting up two subwoofers.
We're not
There
going
it
to get.
is, man. I found it. I found the Achilles heel.
That's it. We're not going to get to this week. We're at 2 hours right now. I don't mind going a little bit longer because it's only
Nor do I.
10:40 local time. But I don't know that we're going to get to this week's questions because we're at 14 and this week's question starts at 17,
17.
which is that's
We're
it.
doing pretty good, though. So let's see how much we can do just to try and
All
put it
right,
up.
Lee and Jeff. I don't know if they are somehow connected. Do they, whatever. Lee has a fun correction for when we were dealing with her
A
months.
month.
I got it. Just give me a second. I have to think about it. Hermont's three Denon receivers all in the closet together where IR remote control commands were getting mixed up. We said we didn't know of any AEV receivers that offered more than two different sets of IR controls. He looked through the manual of his Onkyo TX NR818 and found that it has three remote IDs. So instead of a new $500 combo from URC, Hermont could just buy three Onkyo receivers. Doesn't solve the problem of all of his Roku boxes or
Apple
his Apple
TVs.
TVs or whatever it was. But
No, I
yes,
mean that
that's
was
another way of doing it.
that
So,
that was a tongue-in-cheek one, just because I said I didn't know of any that had more than two. He's like, I found one that I should have known. I have an 818 sitting in a box doing nothing right now, but I have one.
uh, sad little receiver. Jeff wanted to chime in about that URCRF remote plus the MRF 300 base station combo. He says that's what he's been using, and Tom was correct. Hey, so, could you say that to my wife, please? They went dealer only, so it isn't easy for regular consumers to get updated databases of IR codes. However, he says that most manufacturers haven't changed their codes since the 2008-2009 database that is still available, and you can always learn commands directly from the original remotes or download individual codes one at a time. Jeff also wanted to recommend a Peerless PRS projector mounts in addition to the Chief brand mounts that Rob mentioned. He says that Peerless mounts are very easy to lock down so they don't drift in their adjustments at all, and that they do offer a quick release that makes it easy to separate the projector from the mount for things like cleaning or replacing a filter without messing up the adjustments for positioning. I'm glad he's saying this because I've never found it to be the case with any of mine that I've worked with, but I know it exists. It's just I haven't been lucky enough to have that. Finally, Jeff is using the NAS network attached storage to store his music, and he has a Denon AVRX 4000, the Oppo BDP 103 Blu-ray player. He's trying to play two-channel and multi-channel music via his network. He says that the Synology DS app for his iPhone works great, but only for two-channel. And he says that his Onkyo can play the multi-channel music via DLNA, but it isn't gapless. How can you survive without gapless? That does bug me on my phone. It doesn't do gap. My phone
Yeah.
app that I use doesn't do gapless, and it's sort of irritating when you realize that when you play it on the iPod, it is gapless, and then you're like, "Why is it?" Pause right there, and you realize it's not gapless. So it is a little irritating, especially if you're in an album that where the track separates, don't have pauses, between the different one. There's
Mm-hmm.
or silences between the two. So he's wondering if there's an easy way to play all of his music and have it be gapless. Rob,
Ah, thanks. Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
he
know about this
mentioned
NES crap.
yeah. Well, I mean, the NAS isn't the problem because it's just a storage. It's just a big bucket that serves up the data. So this is on the player side as far as the gapless issue. That's on the player side. So you're not going to be able to do it through their DS app because, as he found out, that is limited to two-channel only. I don't know fully the capabilities of the Denon AVR X4000 because you can play things directly off of the network. You can pull content directly off of network attached storage into the AVR X4000 itself. You don't need the Oppo Blu-ray player to do that. But I don't know if it plays multi-channel, and I don't know if it plays it gapless. And he says he's aware that he could do that, but he hasn't tried it yet. So I don't
Seems
know.
like
I'm
the first
guessing.
thing I would try, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously give it a try because if it's there, then that's free and that was easy, so yay. But I can't tell you for sure that that's going to work. So there are a couple of things. First of all, I know that the newest Denon and Marantz AV receivers, so this is like the X4100 or the X5200 or the SR7009 over on the Marantz side, they actually mention right in their spec sheet that now on their network playback they do gapless. Like that is an actual bullet point that they put in there, which
But
makes
it
me kind
probably
of think
didn't do it with X4000.
that's yeah, because it's not mentioned on the spec sheet of the X4000. So I kind of think that that was actually an upgrade that they wanted to mention for the people who care about it. So that is possible. However, I still don't know if they do multi-channel. Like I know they do FLAC, I know they do Apple lossless,
Oh,
obviously
that's a
they
good
do
question.
Wave
Mhm.
and stuff like. But I don't know if it does multi-channel FLAC or things like that. I don't know. So what is the surefire way? You'd need a network player that for sure does multi-channel and gapless, and I don't know of one that I could tell you for sure does that because I mean the Oppo would have been one of my better guesses, and it does multi-channel, but it doesn't do it gapless.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, this is a challenge because so many network players are two-channel only. Like even really expensive ones, a lot of them are two-channel only. So this is a challenge, and I don't have an answer that I can give him for sure. I'm sorry, you stumped me.
All right. So we'll have to put that out there to the AV crowd. You guys, AV Rant crowd, go ahead and let us
Yeah,
know.
I mean,
It's great.
one option is a home theater PC, which Jeff also mentioned he's not entirely against if that's the only way of doing it, but he sort of wanted to know if there was a cheaper, easier way,
Yeah.
and I don't know off the top of my head.
Oh, I don't know. That's for sure. I hooked up my X4000 to Pandora so that I could
Hmm.
stream Pandora to it and never once listened to it. I just did it. I was like, just in case I ever want to, it's there. It's done. Just like at my parents' house, I had to go over the other day because my brother tapes. He's 30 years old, but he still tapes. He's autistic, so he still tapes Power Rangers on VHS. Never watches them, but he does tape them.
Ah,
And when he tapes them, so I have to have everything set up. So I have a Power Rangers button, and it sets up goes to the right channel and
nice.
everything. My parents were like, "I just want to make sure it works." I'm like, "It works." I did it. And then it didn't work, but that wasn't my fault because somebody had switched the wires when they were cleaning. So Bruno has been auditioning speakers, and he really liked the B&W CM6. Those are the square ones, CM6 speakers. We've seen several mentions of them being difficult to drive, almost always a reference to their impedance dipping down to 3.6 ohms. He'd like to know what difficult to drive really means. Well, think of it this way. We also the ohmage thing. If you look at that number, 8 ohms is typical. That's like your standard speaker. That is what we will consider to be not a difficult to drive speaker. That's a speaker that's just normal. All right. 6 ohms is kind of okay, still kind of normal. 4 ohms is where you start getting to stuff where people are like, you need an amplifier, stuff like amplifier. But the reason is this is when you dip down into those lower ohmages, it's like opening up the pipe of wattage. Okay, so we think of amplifiers as pushing power. It's not the case. That speaker demands power. Okay, and when you create a bigger demand on that amp, it's what we call difficult to drive. That means the amp is now going to have to go from instantaneously putting out a certain amount of power that was perfectly fine doing to maybe double or tripling that. And when that happens, if you don't have a very good amp, the amp could overheat, could shut down, could do all sorts of crazy things, could start to clip. It could do all sorts of crazy things. So that's what difficult to drive means. And 3.6 ohms is certainly a not nice load. It's not the worst by any stretch of the imagination. And 3.6 is something that if it's only every once in a while, it's gonna for a second here or there, that's fine. But if it's gonna happen all the time, you're gonna have an amp that's gonna be having a really bad day.
Yeah, it's the current draw. It's the amperage side of the equation. That's what happens when the impedance gets lower. It means that the same voltage, and the voltage remains the same because that's the actual signal. The voltage is what's saying what frequencies to play and how loud to play them. So the voltage is staying the same, but as the impedance of the speaker gets lower, it's demanding more current, more amperage, more electrons. So if you're thinking about the electrons are the things that are doing the work, then you need more of them when you have a lower impedance speaker. And delivering all of that current is a more difficult thing for an amplifier to do. It's easy. You can do whatever you want with the voltage, basically. It's how much current actually needs to be supplied by the amplifier. That's what makes it more difficult. So yeah, 3.6 ohms, that's getting into the range where if you hooked it up to a entry level, maybe even some mid-level AV receivers, and you turn that up quite loud, they might struggle to deliver that kind of current. And that's why they say these are a difficult to drive speaker, or more difficult than typical,
Right.
and that you wouldn't want to connect them to an entry level AV receiver that might have trouble supplying the current to them. So
Which
it's
goes
sort of a little bit of a warning is all
Yeah,
it really is.
yeah, and I would not have to even look anything up to say that on a review or a preview. I'd be like, yeah, these are difficult to drive because they are. That's just the case, and that's what that number means. And this kind of goes to a second question, which is, and how much does this impact his choice of amplifier? For example, he was considering a Denon AVR X4100, but this difficult to drive talk has him concerned. Now, Bruno and everybody else, difficult to drive does not mean that you can't drive it with any amplifier on the market. Anyone, no matter how crappy or how poorly designed, you can drive it. You just can't turn it very loud,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll be fine. The minute you start turning the volume up to reference or sitting far enough away from the speaker so that you have to have it louder in order to hear it at the level that you want it, that you feel comfortable with, that's when you start running into problems. So how far away are you sitting from these speakers, sir? Are you 13 feet away? Well, you might want to get an external amp. Are you 6 feet away? Maybe you don't. Maybe that'll be just fine. That X4000, 4100. The 4100 is no slouch. This is
That's
not
right.
a receiver that is going to scoff at a little bit of a high amperage draw. This is something that's a receiver that's going to have a pretty robust amp section, and it's probably going to be fine with most situations. But if
Mm-hmm.
you've got a massive room and you're sitting 30 feet away from the things, well, you want a couple of massive monoblocks so that you can still hear these speakers from and that your amps won't clip and catch on fire.
Yeah, I mean, my inclination would be in a, sort of a normal sized room, maybe something that gets up to 23 feet or so in any given dimension, maybe not both ways, but, that sort of size, and you're 12, 14 feet away, something like that. The X4100 should probably be able to drive those speakers just fine on its own. Now, I mean, if you were driving 7 of them simultaneously and like all channels stereo and trying to drive that at reference volume in like a, 20 by 30 foot room or something like that, I'd be like, you probably want an external amplifier for that because there is some consideration of these speakers dipping down to a lower impedance. But yeah, we're not talking about some $200, AV receiver that has hardly any capacitance and
If
no
your
headroom on it.
Yeah, if your question here is, can I buy this receiver, see if I like, see how, see,
Mm-hmm.
hook them up and see how it goes, and then decide whether or not I want an external amp? Absolutely, you
Oh
can
yeah.
absolutely do that. I have no problem saying that. Um, I really don't even think that if you were in a massive room, if that you could, I mean, that you would worry about your amp, you somehow breaking the receiver. I think the receiver would go into protection mode and you would be just fine. But generally speaking, I think if you're in a normal size room, you're probably going to find that the denon that goes just fine,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're not blasting it and you're not overly far away.
Yeah, because I mean these BMWs, they're not dipping down to 1 ohm. They're not
That's
dipping
where
down
you
to
get
two
into
ohms.
real problems.
Yeah, I mean there are speakers out there that do that.
Electrostatic speakers do it all the time, and that's why you
Yeah.
have to have these massive amps to hook up to these things.
I mean what is the THX Ultra says it can't dip below 3.2, right? Is that the number that they spec?
Is it really? I thought it was higher than that. I thought they.
No.
I might be wrong, but
I
I'm
mean
not
not
quite.
not nominal impedance, but
Oh
the
yeah, of course.
minimum impedance
But
at some
nominal
point. I
has to be
think
like 8. It doesn't have to be 8 or no lower than 6 or something
oh no,
like
they can be 4. THX
that.
Ultra 2 can be 4. Nominal, but I think they spec that it can't dip below 3.2. So I mean, there's little doubt in my mind that if Denon had submitted the AVR X4100 to THX and said, rate our amplifiers, do they meet THX Ultra spec? I believe they would, just given the level of amplification that's built in there. So I don't think these really would have any problem driving these speakers. BMW is not making speakers that are like impossible to be driven by
Yeah,
regular consumer gear. That's not their market. So you should be fine.
especially not that gear too, because that was more a consumer level brand, not one of their super
Yeah,
one that looks like a
that's right.
stupid shell. All right. Lastly, Mike enjoys 3D on occasion. Hey, you and Rob. He found a $25 device that converts 2D into 3D, and wondering why this wouldn't be built into every 3D display by default. First of
It
all, I can only
almost is.
I was gonna say I've never done 3D at home, so Rob will have to answer this question. But a $25 device that converts 2D and 3D makes me wonder how it would look. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, most 3D TVs do have a 2D to 3D converter. So that, if you're watching whatever, obviously the vast majority of content is 2D, that it will try and create some sort of 3D effect. It often looks like cardboard cutouts in front of a flat background with, trying to create some sort of parallax effect to
I
give
was
you a
gonna
little bit of
say
3D.
it looks like that moon driver, the video game I used to play in the in the arcades back in the day, where the
Yep.
little car with six wheels and three different mountain ranges that were going
That's
at
right.
speeds behind it.
But I mean, Mike isn't wrong. There are a handful of 3D TVs that did not have 2D to 3D converters already built into them. And I mean, obviously, it's not an expensive chip. Here's a $25 retail dollar device, which means the chip itself probably costs like 70 cents. So, why wouldn't it be built in? Because they wanted to save 70 cents. That's the only reason it would be built in. I mean, really, that becomes a big deal when you're talking about profit margins that are so slim like they are on
Yeah.
TVs. So I mean, you got Vizio who just said, forget it, we're not doing 3D at all anymore because not enough of our market cares about 3D for it to be worth it for us to even build that into our TVs anymore. And I can't say
Do
they're
you think they
wrong
just
on
like
that choice.
looked at the sales of their glasses, like the extra
Exactly.
glasses, and went, no one's buying them. If no one's buying them, what does that mean? Does that mean that nobody's using 3D? And I think somebody went,
Nope.
I think so. I think that's exactly what it means. Well, screw
Hmm.
this. Why
But
are
I
we
have to say
paying
that
$2.50 to put this 3D crap in here? So,
the Ray Coronado turned me on to this. I have to say the one place where the 2D to 3D conversion works quite nicely is something like a driving game where you have a fixed perspective and a video game that is giving you lots of three-dimensional type data.
uh,
It works really pretty darn well for something like a driving game where it's a fixed perspective. Other games, not necessarily so much because again it's just doing sort of a parallax effect. But
really, first-person shooter seems like it'd be the same sort of situation, but it's not.
not
You're going left to right a little bit more.
Yeah, and you're often swiveling quite quickly,
Yeah.
which 3D not so great when you're moving really fast. So when you're always just facing
Sort of
forward,
vomit-inducing, really. You mentioned
so this 2D to 3D
That's it.
converter, if you have a 3D TV and you play lots of racing games, or you just want to watch the news like they're cardboard cutouts, then go ahead and spend your 25 bucks. But check your TV because it probably has one built in anyway.
All right, so we're caught up to this week.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've done a 2 hour and 20-minute podcast so far, so we are stopping.
Yup.
Um, if you did not get your question answered, and your name is Bill, Ashley, Bruno again, Nick, scrolling, Jared, Jose, Everett, Efren
Well,
again.
Efren's is like from like years
Oh,
ago at
that's
this
that's
point.
one of the ones where review the review
Review the
thing.
review.
Then we'll get you next week. But if if you are not one of those people, and you think that we should be answering your question that we maybe somehow missed, re-forward it to us. Or if you have a new question, send it to rob@avrant.com, Tom at avrant, website www.avrant.com. Facebook.com/avrant podcast is a great way to get a hold of us. And at First Reflect or at avrant_Tom for that Twitter stuff. Wow, we really powered through a lot of that. All right, I'm surprised we got that far. All right, for AV Rant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
There will be an after party, and hopefully I will not look as flat afterwards. All right, see you guys.